Emma's wheelchair hit the floor with a crash that silenced the entire diner. Her books scattered, her medical brace cracked against the tile, and the three boys standing over her were laughing. Not nervous laughter, cruel, deliberate amusement at a 16-year-old disabled girl they'd just assaulted in front of 40 witnesses who did absolutely nothing. Then the German Shepherd moved. Then the Navy SEAL in digital camouflage stepped between them. What happened in the next 8 seconds would land someone in handcuffs, fill a courtroom with an entire SEAL team, and prove that some people still believe protecting the helpless isn't optional. It's sacred. And what the security footage revealed would expose something far worse than one incident of bullying. Before we continue, if you believe our veterans deserve our support and that standing up for the vulnerable matters, hit that subscribe button right now. Stay with me until the very end of this story and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this message travels. Now, let's get back to the moment everything changed. The sound Emma made when she hit the floor wasn't a scream. It was something worse. A startled gasp of pain mixed with humiliation. The sound of someone who'd been hurt so many times, they'd stopped expecting help. Her wheelchair toppled sideways, one wheel still spinning uselessly. The medical brace on her left leg had twisted during the fall, and even from across the diner, you could see it wasn't sitting right anymore. Her books, library books she'd have to pay for if they were damaged, lay scattered across the floor, pages bent, one of them soaking up spilled water from a glass that had fallen with her. Dylan Sutherland stood directly over her, his expensive sneakers inches from her face. He was 17, tall, athletic, wearing a varsity jacket that probably cost more than Emma's mother made in a week. His two friends flanked him, Brett and Marcus, both from the same wealthy neighborhood, both wearing the same expression of amused contempt. "Oops," Dylan said, his voice dripping with mock concern. "Did you trip? Oh wait, you can't really trip, can you? Since you can't really walk." Brett laughed. Marcus pulled out his phone, already recording. Emma tried to push herself up, but her left arm, weakened by cerebral palsy, couldn't support her weight properly. She got halfway up and collapsed again, her cheek hitting the cold tile floor. "Jesus, she's like a turtle on its back," Marcus said, still filming. "This is going straight to TikTok." 43 people in that diner. 43 witnesses to what was happening. Not one of them moved. A businessman in the corner booth looked down at his laptop, suddenly very interested in his spreadsheet. A young couple by the window found their phones fascinating. An elderly woman near the register clutched her purse tighter and looked away. The waitress, Katie, who'd served Emma and her mother dozens of times over the years, stood frozen behind the counter with a pot of coffee in her hand, her mouth open but no words coming out. This wasn't the first time Emma had been targeted. Everyone in that diner knew it. This was the 4th time in 6 months these same boys had found her in public and made her suffering into entertainment. And every single time, people had looked away. Emma finally managed to get her right hand under her, pushing up enough to see Dylan's face looming over her. He was smiling. Actually smiling, like this was the best part of his day. "You know what's pathetic?" he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Your mom works 2 jobs, and you still dress like that. What is that shirt, from Goodwill?" "Yeah, it is. I can see the sticker residue." "Please," Emma managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. "Just let me get up." "Let you get up? I didn't knock you down. You fell. That's what happens when you're—" He paused, drawing out the word. "Defective." That's when the growl came. Low, deep, the kind of sound that triggers something primal in the human brain. A warning that doesn't need translation. Every head in the diner turned. The German Shepherd stood in the doorway, all 85 pounds of muscle and trained precision. His tan and black coat was immaculate, his ears forward, his dark eyes locked on Dylan with an intensity that made the boy take an involuntary step backward. Behind the dog stood a man in Navy working uniform Type 3, the digital green and brown camouflage pattern that marked him as active duty. Chief Petty Officer Jake Morrison was 35 years old, built like someone who'd spent 2 decades conditioning his body for combat. His dark brown hair was cut military short, his face weathered by deployments in places most people only saw on the news. But what struck you immediately wasn't his size or his uniform. It was his eyes. Calm, assessing, the eyes of someone who'd seen real violence and knew exactly how to respond to it. "Rex, easy," Jake said quietly. The dog stopped growling, but didn't relax, his attention still fixed on Dylan. Jake walked slowly toward Emma, each step deliberate, his boots barely making sound on the tile floor. He didn't look at the 3 boys yet. His entire focus was on the girl on the floor. "Ma'am," he said, his voice gentle despite the authority it carried. "Are you hurt?" Emma looked up at him, stunned. In 6 months of being tormented by these boys, not one adult had ever asked her that question. I'm okay," she managed. "I just need—" "Your wheelchair," Jake finished. He was already moving toward it, riding it with one smooth motion, checking the wheels, making sure nothing was broken. Then he turned to Emma, but before he could offer assistance, Dylan stepped forward. "Hey man, this is none of your business. She fell. We were just—" Jake finally looked at him. Just looked. Didn't say anything. Didn't move aggressively. Just made eye contact with the kind of steady, unwavering attention that made Dylan's voice trail off. "You were just— what?" Jake asked quietly. "We were just messing around. She knows we're joking, right, Emma?" Emma said nothing. Couldn't say anything. The fear that had kept her silent for months was still there, heavy and choking. Jake turned back to Emma. "Is that true? Were they just joking?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. She wanted to say yes, wanted to avoid confrontation, wanted to disappear. But something in Jake's face, the absolute certainty that he would believe her, that he would take her seriously, made the truth come out. "No," she whispered. "They pushed me. Dylan pushed my wheelchair. On purpose." The temperature in the diner seemed to drop 10 degrees. Jake straightened slowly, turning to face Dylan fully now. Rex moved to his left side, perfectly positioned, perfectly controlled.
"Is that true?" Jake asked Dylan. "Did you push her wheelchair?"
"Dude, she's lying. She's just trying to—" "I'm going to ask you one more time." Jake's voice was still quiet, but something in it made everyone in the diner pay attention. "Did you push this girl's wheelchair?" Dylan's face flushed red. He wasn't used to being questioned, wasn't used to adults who didn't immediately believe whatever story he spun. "So what if I did? What are you going to do about it?" The moment hung there, crystallized. Jake could have walked away, could have helped Emma up, called the police, let the system handle it. That's what 43 other people would have done. Jake reached down and helped Emma to her feet. Gently, carefully, making sure she was stable before guiding her back into her wheelchair. He adjusted the medical brace on her leg with surprising gentleness for someone with his size and strength. "You okay?" he asked her again. Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. Jake turned back to the 3 boys. "You need to apologize. Right now." Dylan laughed. Actually laughed. "I'm not apologizing to— You assaulted a disabled minor in a public place. That's a crime. Multiple crimes, actually. Battery, harassment, possibly a hate crime depending on how the prosecutor wants to charge it." Jake's voice remained calm, factual. "So you have 2 choices. You apologize to this young woman right now, sincerely, and then you leave and don't come near her again. Or I call the police and we handle this officially." "You can't tell me what to do," Dylan said, his voice rising. "Do you know who my father is?" I don't care if your father is the president. You put your hands on someone who couldn't defend themselves. That makes you a coward and a bully. Now apologize." Brett stepped forward, trying to look intimidating.
Maybe you should mind your own business, old man.
Rex's growl came back, deeper this time. The dog's eyes never left Dylan, but the message was clear. Threaten Jake and find out what a military working dog does to threats. "Rex is a retired explosives detection dog," Jake said conversationally. "Served 3 deployments in Afghanistan. He's trained to identify threats and neutralize them. Right now, he's identifying you as a threat. I'd suggest you don't give him a reason to act on that assessment." Marcus, still filming, finally lowered his phone. "This is crazy. We didn't do anything wrong." "You filmed yourself assaulting someone. That's called evidence." Jake gestured toward the phone. "I'd keep that if I were you. The prosecutor will want it." That's when Dylan made his mistake. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the lifetime of never facing consequences. Maybe it was the rage of being called out in front of witnesses. Whatever the reason, Dylan rushed forward and shoved Jake hard in the chest. What happened next took 3 seconds. Jake's hand came up, not to strike, but to intercept. He caught Dylan's wrist mid-push, used the boy's own momentum to turn him, and applied a controlled joint lock that put Dylan on his knees with his arm extended at an angle that made it very clear Jake could break it if he chose to. Dylan screamed, not from pain yet, but from shock and fear. "Stop! You're hurting him!" Brett yelled. "I'm restraining him," Jake corrected calmly. "He assaulted me. I'm defending myself using the minimum force necessary. Rex, guard." The German Shepherd moved between Jake and the other 2 boys, his posture making it clear that if they moved toward Jake, they'd have to go through 85 pounds of trained military dog first. Neither of them moved. "Here's what's going to happen," Jake said, his voice still eerily calm despite having Dylan in a joint lock on the floor. "I'm going to let you go. You're going to stand up, slowly. You're going to apologize to Emma, and then you're going to leave. Are we clear?" "My shoulder! You're breaking my shoulder!" "I'm not, but I could. Are we clear?" "Yes! Yes, okay!" Jake released him. Dylan scrambled backward, clutching his shoulder, his face red with humiliation and rage. "Apologize," Jake said. "I'm sorry," Dylan spat out, not looking at Emma. "To her. Look at her and say it like you mean it." Dylan turned toward Emma, hatred burning in his eyes. "I'm sorry." It wasn't sincere. Everyone knew it. But it was said. "Now leave." The 3 boys backed toward the door, Dylan still clutching his shoulder, Marcus and Brett flanking him protectively. At the threshold, Dylan stopped and turned back. "You have no idea what you just did," he said to Jake. "My father is Richard Sutherland. He owns half this town. You just ended your career." "Your father doesn't own me," Jake said quietly. "And if he raised you to think you can hurt people without consequences, then he failed as a parent. Now get out." They left. The door closed behind them with a soft chime that seemed absurdly cheerful, given what had just happened. The diner remained silent for another long moment. Then, slowly, sound returned. Someone coughed. A fork clinked against a plate. The businessman in the corner closed his laptop. But no one said anything. No one approached Jake to thank him. No one checked on Emma. They just went back to their meals, their phones, their newspapers, pretending nothing had happened. Pretending they hadn't just watched 3 boys assault a disabled girl and done absolutely nothing about it. Katie, the waitress, finally found her voice. "Chief Morrison, your usual booth is open if you want it." Jake looked at her, really looked at her, and Katie flushed and looked away. "You saw what happened," Jake said. It wasn't a question. Yes. "And you didn't help." Katie's hands trembled around the coffee pot. I didn't want to get involved. Those boys, their families, they have lawyers and—" She's 16 years old, and she was on the floor, and you didn't want to get involved. Jake's voice wasn't angry. That somehow made it worse. Just disappointed. Tired. He turned to Emma. "Do you need a ride home? I can call your parents." "My mom's at work," Emma said quietly. "She works double shifts at Memorial Hospital. I was just getting lunch before I go to the library." "You're here alone?" "Usually, yeah." Jake looked around the diner again, at all the adults who'd watched and done nothing. Then he looked back at Emma. "Can I buy you lunch? Make sure you eat something before you go?" Emma hesitated. Stranger danger was real, even when the stranger was in a Navy uniform with a service dog. But something about Jake's face, about the way he'd helped her without expecting anything in return, made her trust him. "Okay," she said softly. They moved to a booth, Jake, Emma, and Rex, who lay down beside the table with his head on his paws, still alert but relaxed. KB brought menus with shaking hands.
"What happened to your shoulder?" Emma asked after they'd ordered, gesturing to where a scar peeked out from under Jake's uniform collar.
"IED in Kandahar, 2019. I was lucky. The dog I was working with, Bruno, detected it before I got close. Saved my life. He died 3 months later from kidney failure. Unrelated to the deployment. Just bad luck." "I'm sorry." Jake smiled slightly. Bruno did his job, gave everything he had. That's all any of us can do. He paused. "Those boys, they've done this before, haven't they?" Emma looked down at her hands. "Yeah." "How many times?" "I don't know, maybe a dozen. They started at school. Then they found out I come here sometimes and—" She trailed off. "And no one stopped them." "Adults don't like getting involved. My mom says people are scared of lawsuits and drama. The Sutherlands donated a new library to the school. Mr. Sutherland knows the mayor. Brett's dad is on the school board." Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. "So nothing ever happens to them. Until today." "You're going to get in trouble. Dylan wasn't lying about his dad. Mr. Sutherland really does own half the town. He'll come after you." Jake leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "Let him try. I've dealt with worse than rich lawyers. And Emma." He waited until she looked up at him. "What happened today wasn't right. What's been happening to you isn't right. And the fact that adults have been letting it happen because they're scared of lawyers or bad publicity or whatever excuse they tell themselves, that's not right either." "But that's just how things are." "No, that's how things have been. There's a difference." Their food arrived. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, Rex occasionally lifting his head when someone walked past, but otherwise content. "Can I ask you something?" Emma said halfway through her sandwich. "Of course." "Why did you help me? You don't know me. You could have just walked past like everyone else." Jake was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. "When I was in Afghanistan," he finally said, "we ran convoy protection. One day we got called to escort a group of kids to a new school the military had built. These kids had been walking 6 miles each way to get to class because their village didn't have education. 6 miles, some of them barefoot, through territory where Taliban sometimes operated." He paused, took a sip of coffee. "We picked them up in armored vehicles, made sure they got there safe. And this one girl, maybe 8 years old, she had a club foot, made walking really difficult. She was always last in line, always struggling to keep up. The Taliban had targeted her specifically before. She was easy prey, you know, vulnerable." Emma nodded slowly, seeing where this was going. "One of my teammates, Rodriguez, he started carrying extra water just for her. Made sure she got breaks when she needed them, walked at her pace instead of rushing her. And one day I asked him why he bothered. You know what he said?" "What?" He said, "Because if we can't protect an 8-year-old girl with a disability from the people who want to hurt her, what the hell are we even doing here?" Jake met Emma's eyes. Rodriguez died 2 months later, roadside bomb. But that conversation stuck with me. Because he was right. If we can't protect people who need protection, if we just walk past suffering because it's inconvenient or risky or none of our business, then what's the point of all this? He gestured to his uniform. What's the point of serving if we only serve when it's easy? Emma's eyes were wet. I wish more people thought like that. So do I. They finished eating. Jake paid for both meals, despite Emma's weak protest. As they stood to leave, Katie approached nervously. "Chief Morrison, I just wanted to say, I should have helped earlier. I should have said something." "Yes," Jake agreed simply. "You should have." Katie flinched. "Are you going to report this to the police?" "I already did. Called it in while you were getting our food. They'll want a statement from you." The color drained from Katie's face. "But the Sutherlands will..." "Will what? Sue you for telling the truth? Let them try." Jake's voice softened slightly. "Katie, I get it. You're scared. But Emma's been scared every day for months, and she's 16 years old. At some point, adults have to act like adults." Outside the diner, Jake walked Emma to the library, Rex trotting beside them. It was only 3 blocks, but Jake insisted. "If those boys come back, if they try anything else, you call 911 immediately. Don't wait, don't try to handle it yourself. Just call. Understand?" "Okay." "And Emma," Jake pulled a business card from his pocket. "This has my cell number. If you ever feel unsafe, if you ever need help, you call me, day or night. I mean that." Emma took the card, holding it like it was something precious. "Thank you, Chief Morrison." "Call me Jake." "Thank you, Jake." He watched until she was safely inside the library, then turned to Rex. "Well, boy, I think we just kicked a hornet's nest." Rex looked up at him with an expression that clearly said he'd been in worse situations. Jake's phone rang before he'd made it back to his truck. Unknown number. "Morrison?" "Chief Petty Officer Morrison, this is Detective Sarah Chen with the local police department. I understand you filed a report about an assault at Martha's Diner?" "That's correct." "Can you come down to the station? We'd like to get your full statement." Something in her tone made Jake pause. "Is there a problem, Detective?" "Let's just say we've already received a call from Richard Sutherland's attorney. They're claiming you assaulted his son without provocation. They're pushing for charges." Jake closed his eyes, unsurprised. "Of course they are." "Chief Morrison, I need you to understand something. The Sutherland family has significant influence in this town. This isn't going to be a simple he said, she said situation. They have resources, connections, and a very aggressive legal team." "Detective, I was a Navy SEAL for 15 years. I've been shot at by actual terrorists. I think I can handle a lawyer." "It's not just the lawyer I'm worried about." Chen's voice dropped lower. "I've seen how this plays out. Rich families protect their kids. Witnesses develop amnesia. Evidence disappears. And the person who tried to do the right thing ends up destroyed." "Are you trying to warn me off giving a statement?" "No, I'm trying to prepare you for what's coming. Because if you go forward with this, if you testify that Dylan Sutherland assaulted that girl, you're going to face a level of scrutiny and legal pressure that most people can't handle." "Good thing I'm not most people." There was a pause. Then, "I was hoping you'd say that. Come down whenever you're ready. I'll take your statement personally." Jake hung up and looked at Rex. "What do you think, boy? Should we back down? Let some rich kid get away with hurting a disabled girl because his daddy has money?" Rex's expression suggested that was the dumbest question he'd ever heard. "Yeah, that's what I thought too." The police station was a 30-minute drive from the diner. Jake used the time to call his commanding officer and explain the situation. Captain Williams listened without interrupting, then sighed heavily. "Jake, you know I support you, but this is going to get messy. If the Sutherland family is as connected as you say, they'll come after you hard. They might even try to involve the Navy, claim you misused your position or authority. I was off duty. I was in uniform because I'd just finished training exercises. I didn't identify myself as military or use military authority. I just stopped an assault in progress. You and I know that. But lawyers can twist anything. Just be careful. And Jake." Williams paused. "For what it's worth, Rodriguez would be proud of you." The mention of his dead teammate hit harder than Jake expected. "Thank you, sir." Detective Chen was waiting when Jake arrived at the station. She was maybe 40, Korean American, with sharp eyes that assessed him quickly and thoroughly. "Chief Morrison, thank you for coming in." "Just doing my civic duty, Detective." She led him to an interview room, and for the next 2 hours, Jake gave the most detailed statement of his life. Every word Dylan said, every action, the exact sequence of events that led to Jake restraining him, the names of witnesses, the fact that Marcus had filmed the whole thing. Chen took notes, asked clarifying questions, and nodded occasionally. "This Marcus kid, you think he still has that video?" "Unless he's smart enough to delete it. But teenagers aren't usually that smart. They post first, think later." "I'll get a warrant for his phone." Chen sat back. "Chief Morrison, I have to ask. The restraint you used on Dylan Sutherland, that's military combat training, isn't it? It's basic defensive tactics. Any security guard or police officer learns the same techniques. But you're not a security guard. You're a Navy SEAL. The Sutherland attorney is going to argue you used excessive force, that you're a trained killer who attacked an unarmed teenager." Jake's jaw tightened. "I'm trained to protect people, Detective. That includes protecting myself when someone assaults me. I used the minimum force necessary to restrain someone who'd already demonstrated he was willing to get physical. I didn't strike him, didn't break anything, didn't use any technique that would cause permanent damage. His father is claiming you dislocated his shoulder. Then his father is lying. I used a basic wrist lock. It's uncomfortable, but it doesn't cause injury unless the person being restrained fights against it. If Dylan hurt himself, it's because he was struggling." Chen studied him for a long moment. "You know what I think? I think you did exactly what you're supposed to do when you witness an assault. I think you showed restraint most people wouldn't have. And I think the Sutherlands are going to try to destroy you for it anyway." "Let them try. They've already started. While you were driving here, Richard Sutherland's attorney filed a formal complaint. They're claiming battery, assault, excessive use of force, and they're pushing for charges. They've also filed a civil suit for damages." Jake felt his stomach drop, but kept his expression neutral. "On what grounds?" "Emotional distress, physical injury, something about defamation of character, because you called Dylan a coward in front of witnesses." Chen rolled her eyes. "It's garbage, but it's expensive garbage. The kind that buries people under legal fees, even if they win." "So what happens now?" "Now, I finish my investigation. I interview witnesses, including Emma Collins. I try to get that video from Marcus's phone. And then I send everything to the prosecutor, and they decide whether to charge you or Dylan or both or neither." "How long will that take?" "In a normal case, a week, maybe 2. In a case involving Richard Sutherland," Chen shrugged, "could be months. He'll use every connection he has to slow things down, to pressure the prosecutor, to make your life difficult." Jake stood up. "Is there anything else you need from me right now?" "Just one thing." Chen stood too. "That girl, Emma. Does she have anyone looking out for her? Because if this goes to trial, she's going to be called as a witness. And the defense attorneys are going to tear her apart. They're going to make her look like a liar, an attention seeker, someone who manipulated you into attacking innocent teenagers. She's 16 years old with cerebral palsy. What kind of monster attacks a kid like that on the witness stand? The kind that gets paid $600 an hour by Richard Sutherland. Chen's expression was grim. I've seen it before, Chief Morrison. They'll dig into her family, her mother's finances, anything they can use. They'll claim Emma's looking for a payout, that she's exaggerating her disability, that she provoked the boys somehow. That's disgusting. That's the American legal system, when you have enough money to weaponize it. Jake walked out of the police station with Rex at his side, his mind racing. He thought he was just stopping a bullying incident. He hadn't realized he was starting a war. His phone rang again. This time it was a number he recognized. His SEAL team's senior chief. Morrison, what the hell did you do? I stopped a kid from hurting a disabled girl, Senior Chief. Yeah, well, that kid's father just called the base commander. He's demanding you be court-martialed for conduct unbecoming. He's claiming you attacked his son while in uniform, that you're a danger to civilians. Jake's grip on the phone tightened. That's a lie. I know it's a lie. The old man knows it's a lie. But this Sutherland guy has connections in D.C. He's already got 2 congressmen calling for an investigation. This is insane. This is what happens when you mess with people who have more money than sense. Listen, the team has your back. All of us. But you need to lawyer up, and I mean yesterday. This guy is coming for your career, your reputation, everything. After the call ended, Jake sat in his truck with Rex in the passenger seat, staring at nothing. What did we get ourselves into, boy? Rex licked his hand. His expression clearly said, We did the right thing. That's all that matters. Yeah, Jake said quietly. But doing the right thing doesn't always protect you from the consequences. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He kept seeing Emma's face when she hit the floor, hearing Dylan's cruel laughter, feeling the weight of 43 people who'd chosen to do nothing. At 0300 hours, he gave up on sleep and called a number he hadn't used in 3 years. This better be life or death, Morrison. Hey, Marcus, sorry to wake you. Commander Marcus Chen, no relation to Detective Sarah Chen, had been Jake's team leader for 6 years before retiring to practice law. He specialized in military justice and veteran advocacy. Jake, what's wrong? Jake explained everything. The diner, the assault, the restraint, the Sutherland family's response. Marcus listened without interrupting. When Jake finished, there was a long silence. They're going to destroy you, Marcus finally said. Or they're going to try. You understand that, right? This isn't about justice. This is about a powerful family protecting their image. I know. And you're still going forward with this? You're still willing to testify against this kid? There's a 16-year-old disabled girl who needs someone to stand up for her. If I back down, what message does that send? That money and power can buy your way out of anything? That it's okay to hurt vulnerable people as long as your dad can afford good lawyers? No, it sends the message that you know how to pick your battles. Jake, I love you like a brother, but this is a fight you can't win. Rodriguez would have fought. Another long silence. Marcus had served with Rodriguez too, had been at his memorial service. Yeah, Marcus said quietly. He would have. Stupid, stubborn bastard would have fought until they buried him. A pause. I'm in. I'll represent you. Pro bono. But Jake, you need to understand what's coming. Character assassination, financial pressure, possibly criminal charges. They're going to make you regret the day you stepped into that diner. Let them try. That's what I was hoping you'd say. I'll catch the first flight out. In the meantime, don't talk to anyone without me present. Not the police, not the Navy, not reporters if they start calling. No one. Got it? Got it. And Jake, get some sleep. We're going to need you sharp for what's coming." Jake hung up and looked at Rex, who'd been listening to the entire conversation with typical canine patience. "Well, boy, looks like we're really doing this." Rex's tail thumped once against the floor. Doing the right thing. That's what it always came down to. Not the easy thing, not the smart thing, but the right thing, even if it cost him everything. The next morning started with a phone call Jake wasn't expecting. Emma's mother. "Chief Morrison, this is Sarah Collins, Emma's mom. I need to talk to you about what happened yesterday." Jake tensed, preparing for anger or blame or demands that he stay away from her daughter. "Yes, ma'am. I understand if you're upset." "Upset?" Sarah's voice cracked. "I'm grateful. Emma told me everything. What those boys did to her, what you did to help her."
She hasn't stopped talking about you and Rex. Jake felt something loosen in his chest. "She's a brave kid, Mrs. Collins." "She's terrified. The Sutherlands called me last night. Their lawyer told me that if Emma testifies against Dylan, they'll sue us for defamation. They said they'd make sure I lose my job at the hospital, that we'd lose our apartment, that Emma would lose her disability benefits." Sarah was crying now. "I worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. I can't afford a lawyer. I can't afford to fight people like them." "Mrs. Collins, they're trying to scare you into silence. That's what bullies do when they have money instead of morals." "But what if they're not bluffing? What if I let Emma testify and we lose everything? She needs her medical care. Her medications cost $800 a month, even with insurance. Her physical therapy is twice a week. If I lose my job..." "You won't lose your job, and Emma won't lose her benefits. Those are illegal threats, Mrs. Collins. Their lawyer is counting on you not knowing that." "How do you know?" "Because my lawyer is on his way here right now, and he's going to make sure the Sutherlands understand that intimidating witnesses is a felony. But I need to know, is Emma willing to tell the truth about what happened? Because if she is, I promise you, I will make sure she's protected." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Can you come to our apartment? I think Emma should hear this from you directly." Jake arrived at the Collins apartment 45 minutes later. It was a small 2-bedroom unit in a building that had seen better decades. The carpet was worn, the walls needed paint, but everything was clean and organized. Photos of Emma at various ages covered one wall. School pictures, birthday parties, a younger Emma, before cerebral palsy had progressed to requiring a wheelchair. Emma was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework. Her face lit up when she saw Rex. "Can I pet him?" "Rex, friend," Jake said, giving the release command. The German shepherd walked over to Emma, tail wagging, and laid his head on her lap. Sarah made coffee with shaking hands. "The Sutherland lawyer called again this morning. He said they have witnesses who'll testify that Emma provoked the boys, that she called them names first." "That's a lie," Emma said immediately, her hand still on Rex's head. "I know, honey, but they're saying it anyway." Jake pulled out his phone. "Detective Chen called me this morning. They got the video from Marcus's phone. Want to know what it shows?" Sarah and Emma both nodded. "It shows Dylan pushing Emma's wheelchair. It shows her falling. It shows all 3 boys laughing and filming her while she's on the floor. It shows Dylan making fun of her disability and her clothes. There's audio of everything they said." Jake paused. "It also shows 43 people in that diner doing absolutely nothing to help her." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "People saw and they didn't help?" "People saw and they chose not to get involved. That's going to change." Sarah wrapped her arms around herself. "The lawyer said the video doesn't matter. He said it's edited, that it doesn't show what happened before. He said they'll prove Emma started it." "Mrs. Collins, I need you to understand something. The Sutherlands are lying. They know their son assaulted your daughter. They know he's been doing it for months.
They don't care about the truth. They care about protecting their reputation and making sure Dylan faces no consequences. So what do? We fight back. We tell the truth. We let the evidence speak for itself. And we trust that eventually justice will prevail. And if it doesn't? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. If they destroy us anyway? Jake looked at Emma, who was watching him with those same hopeful eyes she'd had in the diner when he asked if she was hurt. Then we'll have done the right thing anyway. And sometimes that has to be enough. Emma spoke up, her voice stronger than Jake expected. I want to testify. I want to tell everyone what they did to me. Emma, honey, it's going to be really hard. Their lawyers will ask you mean questions. They'll try to make you look like a liar. Mom, they've been calling me worse things for 6 months. At least this time, someone will be listening. Sarah looked at her daughter with a mix of pride and terror. Then she looked at Jake. Okay, we'll do it. But Chief Morrison, if this goes wrong, if we lose everything, you won't. I promise you that. Jake pulled out Commander Chen's business card. This is my lawyer. He's one of the best military justice attorneys in the country. He's agreed to represent me pro bono, and I'm going to ask him to represent you and Emma, too. We can't afford. Pro bono means free. He's doing it because it's the right thing to do. Sarah took the card with trembling hands. Why are you doing this? You don't even know us. Jake thought about Rodriguez, about the 8-year-old girl with the club foot, about every time he'd seen someone vulnerable being targeted and had the power to intervene. Because someone has to, he said simply. 3 days later, Jake sat in Commander Marcus Chen's temporary office, a rented space above a coffee shop, reviewing the case file that had grown to over 200 pages. The Sutherlands aren't playing around, Marcus said, spreading documents across the desk. They've hired Preston and Associates. That's a firm that usually handles corporate litigation and white-collar crime. Their lead attorney, Gerald Preston, charges $800 an hour and has a reputation for destroying opposing witnesses. Let him try. Jake, he will try, and he's good at it. Marcus pulled up a document on his laptop. Look at this. They've already filed motions to exclude the video evidence, claiming it was obtained illegally. They're arguing that Detective Chen didn't have proper warrant authority when she seized Marcus's phone. That's garbage. Marcus voluntarily turned over his phone when Chen asked for it, after she told him she could get a warrant. Preston is arguing that's coercive, that it constitutes an illegal search. Jake felt his jaw clench. So they're trying to suppress the only objective evidence of what happened. Yes. And if the judge grants their motion, this becomes a he said, she said case. Dylan, Brett, and Marcus will all testify that Emma provoked them. They'll say you attacked Dylan without cause. They'll bring in character witnesses to paint the boys as good kids, and you as an unstable veteran with anger issues. I'm not unstable. I know that. But they're going to try to make a jury believe it. They've already requested your military medical records. They're looking for anything. PTSD diagnosis, combat stress, anything they can use to suggest you're dangerous. I've never been diagnosed with PTSD. Then they'll suggest you should have been, that the Navy failed to properly evaluate you, that you're suffering from undiagnosed trauma that makes you overreact to perceived threats. Marcus leaned back in his chair. Jake, I need you to understand what we're up against. This isn't just about one incident in a diner. The Sutherlands are going to put your entire life under a microscope and twist everything they find. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. Jake spent the weekend preparing testimony with Marcus, going over every detail, anticipating every question the defense might ask. On Sunday evening, his phone rang. Detective Chen. Chief Morrison, we have a problem. What kind of problem? 3 of the witnesses from the diner have recanted their statements. They're now saying they didn't see Dylan push Emma's wheelchair. They're saying it looked like she fell on her own and you overreacted. Jake's blood ran cold. Let me guess. The three witnesses who changed their stories all have connections to the Sutherland family? One of them is Richard Sutherland's accountant. Another is Brett's uncle. The third is a woman whose son got into private school thanks to a recommendation letter from Sutherland. So they're lying. They're changing their testimony. And legally, that's going to be a problem. The defense will argue that the witnesses were pressured by police to give statements supporting you. And now they're telling the real truth. That's insane. That's expensive legal maneuvering. Preston knows what he's doing. Jake hung up and immediately called Marcus, who swore creatively for 30 seconds. This is bad, Jake. If we lose 3 witnesses, we still have Katie the waitress. We still have Emma. We still have the video if the judge allows it. Katie the waitress who works at a diner that could lose its business license if the health inspector suddenly decides to do a thorough inspection? Katie whose boss probably got a phone call from someone suggesting it would be in everyone's best interest if she developed amnesia? Jake slammed his fist on the table, making Rex look up in concern. So what, we just let them win? We let them intimidate everyone into silence? No. We find other evidence. We dig into the boy's history. We prove this is a pattern, not an isolated incident. How? Leave that to me. I'm going to make some calls. Monday morning arrived too quickly. The courthouse was smaller than Jake expected. Old brick and marble that spoke to a time when justice felt more certain. He arrived early with Marcus and Rex, all 3 of them in their respective professional attire. Jake in his dress blues, Marcus in a dark suit, Rex in his official canine vest. The Sutherlands were already there. Richard Sutherland was exactly what Jake expected. Late 50s, expensive suit, the kind of confidence that comes from never hearing the word no. Dylan sat next to him, his arm in a sling that Jake was 90% certain was for dramatic effect. Brett and Marcus flanked them, along with their parents, who all looked like they'd stepped out of a country club brochure. Gerald Preston, the defense attorney, was a tall man with silver hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. He shook hands with the prosecutor, chatted easily with the bailiff, and completely ignored Jake's presence. Emma and her mother arrived 10 minutes before the hearing was scheduled to start. Sarah looked terrified. Emma looked determined. "You okay?" Jake asked Emma quietly. "I'm scared, but I'm more angry than scared." "Good. Hold on to that." The judge, Marcia Henderson, was a woman in her early 60s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She called the hearing to order and got straight to business. This is a preliminary hearing to determine if there's sufficient evidence to proceed with charges against Chief Petty Officer Jake Morrison for assault and battery. Mr. Preston, you may present your opening statement. Preston stood, buttoning his jacket with practiced ease. Your Honor, this case is about a dangerous overreaction by a man trained in lethal force. Chief Morrison, while in military uniform and therefore representing the United States Navy, attacked my client, Dylan Sutherland, without provocation or justification. He used combat techniques to injure a 17-year-old boy, causing a shoulder injury that required medical attention and ongoing physical therapy. Jake felt Marcus's hand on his arm, a silent reminder to stay calm. The defense will show that Dylan Sutherland was attempting to help a young woman who had fallen, Miss Emma Collins, when Chief Morrison misinterpreted the situation and responded with violence. We will demonstrate that Chief Morrison has a history of aggressive behavior stemming from undiagnosed combat trauma, and we will prove that he poses a continuing danger to the community if not held accountable for his actions. Preston sat down, looking satisfied. The prosecutor, Jennifer Wade, stood next. She was younger than Preston, maybe 35, and Jake didn't know if that was going to work for or against them. Your Honor, the evidence will show that Chief Morrison witnessed an assault in progress and intervened to protect a disabled minor. The defense's characterization of these events is not only inaccurate, It's offensive to every service member who has ever stood up to protect someone who couldn't protect themselves. She was good.
Better than Jake had hoped. We have video evidence, witness testimony, and a pattern of harassment that proves Dylan Sutherland and his friends have been systematically tormenting Emma Collins for months. Chief Morrison didn't overreact. He responded appropriately to a violent situation, using the minimum force necessary to prevent further harm. Judge Henderson nodded. "Let's see this video evidence." Preston immediately stood. "Your Honor, the defense moves to exclude the video on the grounds that it was obtained through coercive means." "Mr. Preston, I've read your motion. I've also read the response. The video was voluntarily provided by a witness after being informed a warrant could be obtained. That's not coercion. That's standard police procedure." Motion denied. Let's see the video. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as the video played on a screen. Every second of it was worse than Jake remembered. Dylan pushing the wheelchair. Emma falling. The boys laughing. Emma trying to get up and failing. The cruel comments. 43 people doing nothing. When the lights came back up, Jake saw several people in the gallery wiping their eyes. Even Judge Henderson looked affected. "That's disturbing," she said quietly. "Mr. Preston, your client is clearly shown assaulting Miss Collins." "Your Honor, the video doesn't show what preceded that moment. It doesn't show... It shows enough." "Miss Wade, call your first witness." The prosecution calls Emma Collins. Emma wheeled herself to the witness stand, where a bailiff helped position her. She was sworn in, her hand shaking slightly as she placed it on the Bible. Wade approached gently. "Emma, can you tell the court what happened at Martha's Diner on Tuesday afternoon?" Emma's voice was quiet but clear. "I was eating lunch and doing homework. Dylan, Brett, and Marcus came in. They started making fun of me like they always do." "Like they always do? Has this happened before?" "Objection," Preston said. "Relevance. Goes to pattern of behavior, Your Honor." "I'll allow it. Answer the question, Miss Collins." "Yes, they've been doing it since school started. At first it was just mean comments. Then they started posting videos of me online. Then they started getting physical, pushing my wheelchair, knocking my books out of my hands, that kind of thing." "And did you ever report this to school administrators?" "I tried, 3 times. They said it was just kids being kids, and I needed to develop thicker skin." Jake saw Judge Henderson make a note of that. "What happened when they came into the diner on Tuesday?" "Dylan pushed my wheelchair. Hard. I fell. I couldn't get up because my arm doesn't work right. They were laughing and filming me, and nobody helped. Not until Chief Morrison came in." "What did Chief Morrison do?" "He asked if I was hurt. He helped me up. He made sure I was okay. And then he asked the boys to apologize." "And did they apologize?" "Dylan shoved Chief Morrison. That's when Chief Morrison grabbed his arm to stop him." Wade nodded. "Thank you, Emma. No further questions." Preston stood for cross-examination, and Jake felt his muscles tense. This was where it would get ugly. "Miss Collins, you say these boys have been bullying you for months. Why didn't you tell your mother?" "I didn't want to worry her. She works all the time to pay for my medical care." "So you kept it secret. You didn't tell anyone. How convenient." "Objection," Wade said. "Argumentative." "Sustained. Mr. Preston, ask questions. Don't make statements." Preston smiled. "Miss Collins, isn't it true that you have a history of seeking attention through exaggeration?" Emma looked confused. "What? No. Your school records show that you've been to the principal's office 17 times in the past year for various complaints. Complaints that were investigated and found to be exaggerated or false." "That's not true. I reported bullying and they didn't—" "Yes or no, Miss Collins?"
Have you been to the principal's office 17 times?
Yes, but
And were your complaints substantiated? Emma's eyes filled with tears.
They said there wasn't enough evidence, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen.
So these school administrators, trained professionals who work with children every day, determined that your claims were false. Is that correct? Wade stood. Objection! Mischaracterizes the testimony. Overruled. Answer the question, Miss Collins. They didn't say my claims were false. They said they couldn't prove them. That's different. Preston moved closer. Miss Collins, isn't it true that you told your mother you wanted to sue the school district for failing to protect you from bullying?
I never said that.
But your mother did consult with an attorney about a potential lawsuit, didn't she? Sarah stood up in the gallery.
That was after this happened, after your client assaulted my daughter.
Judge Henderson banged her gavel. Mrs. Collins, sit down or I'll have you removed. Mr.
Preston, where are you going with this? Your Honor, I'm establishing that Miss Collins has a financial motive to exaggerate or fabricate claims of bullying. She and her mother are looking for a payout.
That's disgusting, Marcus whispered to Jake.
He's accusing a disabled kid of lying for money.
Emma was crying openly now.
I'm not lying. They hurt me. They've been hurting me for months, and nobody believed me until Chief Morrison.
Preston's expression didn't change. Miss Collins, you've testified that you have cerebral palsy, correct?
Yes.
And this condition affects your balance and coordination?
Yes.
So isn't it possible that you simply fell, that you lost your balance and fell, and in your confusion, you misinterpreted my client's attempt to help you as an assault?
No, he pushed me. I know the difference between falling and being pushed.
But you just admitted your balance is impaired.
How can you be certain? Because I felt his hands on my wheelchair. Because I heard him laughing.
Because this wasn't the first time.
Wade stood. Your Honor, this is harassment of a minor witness.
Mr. Preston, move on. Preston smiled slightly, knowing he'd done enough damage. No further questions. Emma was helped down from the witness stand, still crying. Sarah rushed to her, wrapping her arms around her daughter.
Jake wanted to go to them, to apologize for putting Emma through this,
but Marcus held him back. It's not over yet, Marcus whispered. Wade has more witnesses. But Wade's next witness was Katie the waitress, and within 30 seconds, it was clear something had changed. Miss Thompson, you were working at Martha's Diner on the afternoon in question, correct?
Yes.
And did you witness the altercation between Dylan Sutherland and Emma Collins? Katie's hands were shaking.
I saw some of it. I was busy. It was the lunch rush. But you gave a statement to police saying you saw Dylan push Emma's wheelchair.
I might have been mistaken. Like I said, it was busy. I wasn't really paying attention. Wade looked stunned. Miss Thompson, are you changing your testimony? I'm clarifying it. I thought I saw one thing, but now I'm not sure. Miss Thompson, did someone pressure you to change your statement? Objection, Preston said.
Assumes facts not in evidence.
Sustained. Wade tried again. Have you spoken to anyone associated with the Sutherland family since giving your original statement? Katie looked at the floor. I don't remember. It was painful to watch. Jake could see the fear in Katie's eyes, the shame of knowing she was lying, but being too scared to tell the truth. Wade dismissed her quickly, knowing the testimony was worthless now. Her next two witnesses were customers from the diner who'd been sitting close to Emma, but both of them gave vague, unhelpful testimony that contradicted their original statements. The Sutherlands had gotten to them. All of them. Judge Henderson called a 15-minute recess. Jake followed Marcus into the hallway, his frustration boiling over. They bought them off, or scared them off. Either way, we're losing our witnesses. Not all of them, Marcus said. We still have you.
And we still have the video. The video shows what happened. But if their witnesses say Emma fell on her own, if they claim I overreacted, Jake, breathe. This isn't over. Trust the process. When they returned to the courtroom, Wade called Jake to the stand. He was sworn in and took his seat, his dress blues crisp, his bearing military perfect. He'd testified before in military courts, but this felt different, more personal. More was riding on his words. Wade approached.
Chief Morrison, please tell the court what you witnessed on Tuesday afternoon.
Jake took a breath and told the truth. All of it. Dylan pushing the wheelchair. Emma falling. The laughter. The 43 people who did nothing. His attempt to defuse the situation peacefully. Dylan's assault. The controlled response he'd used to restrain someone who'd already proven willing to get physical. Wade nodded.
Chief Morrison, you have 15 years of military service. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And in that service, you've been trained in defensive tactics?
Yes, ma'am. All service members receive basic defensive training. SEALs receive advanced training in hand-to-hand combat and restraint techniques. In your professional opinion, was the force you used on Dylan Sutherland excessive? No, ma'am. I used a basic wrist lock designed to control without causing injury.
It's the same technique taught to security personnel and law enforcement. The goal is to stop the threat while minimizing harm to all parties. Could you have done more damage if you'd wanted to?
Jake met the judge's eyes. Yes, ma'am. Significantly more. I chose not to because my goal was to stop the assault, not to hurt anyone. Wade smiled slightly.
Thank you, Chief Morrison. Your witness, Mr. Preston.
Preston stood, and Jake braced himself for the attack he knew was coming.
Chief Morrison, you've been a Navy SEAL for 15 years. That means you've seen combat, correct?
Yes, sir.
How many deployments?
7.
And in those deployments, have you killed enemy combatants?
Marcus stood. Objection. Relevance.
Your Honor, I'm establishing the witness's capacity for violence.
Overruled. Answer the question, Chief Morrison. Jake's jaw tightened. Yes, I've engaged enemy combatants in accordance with rules of engagement.
How many? I don't know the exact number. Estimate. I can't. Combat situations don't allow for precise accounting.
More than 10?
Probably.
More than 20?
Your Honor, Marcus interjected, this is clearly meant to prejudice the witness. Mr. Preston, get to your point. My point, Your Honor, is that Chief Morrison is a trained killer who has admitted to killing more than 20 people. And on Tuesday afternoon, he brought those same deadly skills to bear on an unarmed 17-year-old boy. I restrained him. I didn't hurt him. Really? Because Dylan has medical records showing a partially torn rotator cuff requiring physical therapy. Jake felt cold. That's impossible. The technique I used doesn't cause that kind of injury unless you apply excessive force, which you did, because you're a trained killer who doesn't know how to control your violent impulses.
Objection!
Marcus was on his feet. Your Honor, this is outrageous.
Sustained. Mr. Preston, one more comment like that and I'll hold you in contempt. This witness is a decorated service member, not a criminal.
Preston didn't look chastened. Chief Morrison, have you ever been evaluated for PTSD?
No.
Why not? Because I don't have PTSD. How do you know if you've never been evaluated? Because I know my own mental state. Do you? Have you ever had nightmares about combat? Occasionally. That's normal for anyone who's seen combat. Have you ever had flashbacks? No. Have you ever felt hypervigilant in civilian settings? I'm trained to be aware of my surroundings. That's not hypervigilance. That's professional competence.
Preston smiled. Let me ask you this, Chief Morrison. When you saw Dylan near Emma, did you immediately perceive him as a threat?
I saw him push a wheelchair and laugh while a disabled girl was on the floor. Yes, I perceived that as threatening behavior.
But you didn't know what happened before you entered the diner, did you? You didn't know if Emma had said something provocative, if she'd started the altercation.
I know that a 16-year-old girl with cerebral palsy was on the floor, and 3 teenage boys were laughing at her.
That's all I needed to know. So you made a split-second judgment based on incomplete information and responded with violence. Doesn't that sound like combat mentality bleeding into civilian life? Jake forced himself to stay calm. It sounds like witnessing an assault and responding appropriately. You call dislocating a teenager's shoulder appropriate? I didn't dislocate his shoulder. I used a controlled restraint technique. If his shoulder was injured, it's because he continued struggling against a lock that's designed to discourage resistance. Or it's because you used excessive force. I used the minimum force necessary to stop someone who'd already assaulted 2 people, Emma and myself. Preston walked back to his table, picked up a document. Chief Morrison, I have here your fitness reports from the past 5 years. In each one, your commanding officers note your intense dedication to protecting team members and your aggressive response to perceived threats. Doesn't that suggest you have a pattern of overreacting? It suggests I take my responsibility to protect others seriously. So seriously that you attack teenagers in diners. I defended a disabled girl from assault. Or you assaulted a boy who was trying to help her. The back and forth continued for another 20 minutes. Preston trying to paint Jake as unstable and violent. Jake refusing to give ground. Finally, Judge Henderson called a halt. That's enough. Mr. Preston, do you have any other witnesses? Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Dylan Sutherland. Dylan took the stand, his arm still in that sling, his expression the perfect picture of an injured, innocent teenager. Jake wanted to be sick. Preston led Dylan through his version of events. Emma had dropped something. Dylan had tried to help her pick it up. She'd fallen while reaching for it. Dylan had tried to help her up when this crazy military guy attacked him out of nowhere. It was all lies, but Dylan sold it well. He even managed to make his voice crack when describing how scared he'd been. Wade's cross-examination was brief but pointed. Mr. Sutherland, you testified that you were trying to help Emma.
Is that correct? Yes, ma'am. And yet the video shows you laughing while she's on the floor. Can you explain that? I wasn't laughing at her. I was nervous. Sometimes I laugh when I'm uncomfortable. The video also shows you making fun of her clothes and calling her defective. Was that also nervous laughter? Dylan's expression hardened slightly. I don't remember saying that. So the audio on the video is fabricated? Maybe it's someone else. It was loud in there. Wade played the video again, freezing it on a clear shot of Dylan's mouth, forming the word defective. That looks like you, Mr. Sutherland. And it sounds like you. Are you saying it's not? Maybe I said something, but I didn't mean it how it sounded. How did you mean it when you called a disabled girl defective? Preston objected. Wade withdrew the question, but the damage was done. Judge Henderson called for closing statements. Wade went first, making a passionate argument about justice and protecting the vulnerable, and not letting wealth intimidate truth. Preston countered with equally passionate rhetoric about dangerous veterans and rush to judgment, and innocent boys being railroaded by overzealous prosecution. Then, Judge Henderson announced she'd take the matter under advisement and issue a ruling within 3 days. 3 days. 72 hours to find out if Jake's life would continue, or if everything he'd worked for would be destroyed because he'd helped a girl who needed help. As they filed out of the courtroom, Emma wheeled over to Jake. "Thank you for not giving up," she said quietly.
I'm not giving up. No matter what the judge decides, I'm not giving up. Emma smiled slightly. I know. That's why I'm not giving up either. Jake watched her wheel away with her mother, and he thought about Rodriguez again.
About standing in gaps. About doing what's right, even when the cost is high. 3 days until the ruling. 3 days to see if justice actually meant anything. 3 days to find out if protecting a vulnerable 16-year-old girl was worth losing everything. Jake looked down at Rex, who was watching him with those knowing brown eyes. We did the right thing, boy. Rex's tail wagged once. That would have to be enough. The 72 hours of waiting felt like 72 years. Jake tried to maintain his normal routine. Morning runs with Rex, training exercises at the base, paperwork that had been piling up. But his mind kept replaying the hearing, analyzing every word he'd said, every expression on Judge Henderson's face, trying to predict which way the ruling would go. On the second day, Marcus called with news that made Jake's stomach drop. The Sutherlands filed a civil suit.
They're suing you for $2 million in damages, medical expenses, emotional distress, defamation, and something called intentional infliction of emotional trauma. $2 million? Jake sat down hard. I don't have $2 million. I don't have a tenth of that. They know that. This isn't about money. It's about burying you under legal fees until you can't fight anymore. They want you to give up, to recant your testimony, to disappear quietly so Dylan faces no consequences.
I'm not giving up. I know you're not. But Jake, defending this civil suit could cost hundreds of thousands, even if we win. And they can drag it out for years. This is their end game. Make it so expensive and exhausting to fight that you have no choice but to surrender. Jake looked at Rex, who was lying at his feet. The dog's presence was grounding, a reminder of what really mattered.
What if we countersue? What if we go after Dylan for assault, for the pattern of harassment against Emma? With what money? The Collins family can't afford legal fees. You're already stretched thin. The Sutherlands can outlast us in a war of attrition. So, we just let them win? Marcus was quiet for a moment. No, we get creative. I'm reaching out to veteran advocacy groups, civil rights organizations, disability rights lawyers. Someone out there will want to take this case because it's the right thing to do, not because they're getting paid. And if no one does, then we figure something else out. But we don't quit. Rodriguez didn't raise quitters. The mention of their dead teammate hit like it always did. Painful, but motivating. That evening, Jake got an unexpected visitor. Detective Sarah Chen appeared at his door with a file folder and an expression that said she had news he needed to hear.
Can I come in?
Jake stepped aside, letting her enter. Rex gave her a cursory sniff and returned to his spot by the couch. I've been digging into Dylan, Brett, and Marcus, Chen said, sitting down at Jake's kitchen table. Their history, their social media, their phones. And Emma isn't their only victim. Not even close. She opened the folder, spreading out printed screenshots and reports. I found 17 other students they've targeted over the past 3 years.
Kids with disabilities, kids from poor families, kids who didn't fit in. They've been running a coordinated harassment campaign and documenting it all online. Jake felt rage building in his chest. 17 kids? That I could find. There are probably more who never reported it or deleted their social media to escape the harassment. Chen pointed to one screenshot. This is from Marcus's TikTok account. He has a whole series called Freak Watch, where they film themselves tormenting vulnerable students. It has over 100,000 followers. Jesus Christ. It gets worse. Some of their followers send them money through donation apps, basically paying them to escalate the harassment. They've made over $15,000 in the past year from bullying content. Jake stared at the documents, his hands clenching into fists.
Why hasn't anyone stopped this? How have the schools not shut this down?
Because the Sutherlands are generous donors. Richard Sutherland funds the sports programs, the new library, scholarships. The schools don't want to bite the hand that feeds them. So when parents complain about Dylan and his friends, administrators find ways to minimize it, to blame the victims, to make it go away quietly. That's corruption. That's the American education system, when money talks louder than morals.
Chen leaned forward.
But here's the thing. This changes everything. If we can prove Dylan has a pattern of targeting vulnerable kids, if we can show this is organized and profit-driven, we're not looking at simple assault anymore. We're looking at hate crimes, possibly wire fraud for the money they've collected, conspiracy charges. Can you prove it? I'm trying, but the Sutherland's lawyers are already working to get the social media accounts deleted.
They're claiming the content was hacked, that someone else posted under the boys' names. They're muddying the water as fast as I can clear it.
Jake thought about Emma testifying, about Preston tearing her apart on the stand, about Katie and the other witnesses who'd been too scared to tell the truth. We need something they can't delete or explain away. Something that proves definitively what these kids have been doing. Chen smiled slightly. That's why I'm here.
I need your help with something that's technically outside normal procedure.
How far outside? Far enough that if it goes wrong, I could lose my badge, and you could lose your case. Jake met her eyes. What do you need? 2 hours later, Jake found himself doing something he'd never imagined. Breaking into a high school. Not literally breaking in. Chen had arranged for the night custodian, a veteran who'd heard about Jake's situation, to let them in through a side door. But the intent was the same. Accessing information they weren't technically authorized to access. The school's social worker has been documenting complaints about Dylan, Brett, and Marcus for 2 years, Chen explained as they moved through dark hallways. But the administration has been burying those reports. If we can get copies, we can prove the school knew what was happening and did nothing. Why doesn't the social worker just give them to you? She tried.
She was told to delete them or face termination.
She's a single mom with 2 kids. She couldn't afford to lose her job. They reached the administrative office. The custodian, a man named Henry, who'd served in the army during Desert Storm, unlocked the door. I don't know what you're doing in here, Henry said carefully. I didn't see anything. I was in the bathroom for the next 20 minutes. Got it? Got it, Chen said. Thank you, Henry. Don't thank me. Just get those bastards.
My daughter had Dylan in her class. He made her life hell for 6 months before we moved her to a different school.
After Henry left, Chen moved to the filing cabinets. Social worker's name is Rebecca Martinez. Her file should be in here. They found the files 15 minutes later. 2 years' worth of documentation about Dylan, Brett, and Marcus. Complaints from students, parents, teachers. Detailed accounts of harassment, assault, threats. Evidence that the school had known exactly what was happening and had actively covered it up to protect their donors. Chen photographed every page with her phone, making sure each image was clear and readable. This is it, she said quietly. This is what we need. They were almost finished when Jake heard footsteps in the hallway. Chen's head snapped up. Someone's here. They froze, listening. The footsteps were coming closer. Put everything back, Chen whispered urgently. Now. They shoved the files back into the cabinet, but there wasn't time to make it look undisturbed. The footsteps stopped right outside the office door. The handle turned. Jake positioned himself between Chen and the door, his body automatically shifting into defensive posture. The door opened. A security guard stepped in, flashlight raised. Police, don't move! Chen held up her badge. Detective Sarah Chen. I'm conducting an investigation. The guard, a young man maybe 25, looked confused.
At midnight? In a locked office? We have authorization from the custodial staff. I'm going to need to see that authorization. And I'm going to need to call my supervisor. Chen's expression remained calm, but Jake could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. If the guard called his supervisor, questions would be asked. If questions were asked, the Sutherlands would find out.
If the Sutherlands found out, the evidence they'd just gathered would be challenged or destroyed. "Actually," Jake said, stepping forward, "we're done here. We found what we needed." The guard's hand moved to his radio. "I still need to report this. What's your name, son?" "Officer Daniels. And I need you both to—" "Daniels? You serve, Daniels?" The young man blinked, thrown by the question. "What? No, my brother did. Marines." Daniels hesitated. "I don't understand." "Dylan Sutherland, Brett Harrison, Marcus Chen. You know those names?" "Everyone knows those names. Their families basically own this town." "Did you know they've been running an organized harassment campaign against disabled kids? Did you know they make money filming themselves torturing students who can't fight back? Did you know the school has documentation of all of it and has been hiding it to protect their donor relationships?" Daniels looked at the open filing cabinet, then back at Jake. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. And if you report us being here, the evidence we just gathered will disappear. The Sutherlands will make sure of it. And those kids will keep suffering." The guard stood there, his hand still on his radio, clearly wrestling with the decision. "My brother," he said slowly. "He came back from Afghanistan different. PTSD. He has trouble holding jobs, trouble with crowds. Last year, someone posted a video of him having a panic attack at the grocery store, posted it online, and made fun of him. Called him weak. Called him damaged." Jake's chest tightened. "I'm sorry."
The video got 40,000 views before he could get it taken down. He tried to kill himself 3 weeks later.
Daniel's voice cracked. "He survived, but barely. And the person who posted that video never faced any consequences. Just kept posting, kept making fun of veterans and disabled people and anyone they thought was weak." He took his hand off the radio. "I didn't see you here tonight. I was doing my rounds on the other side of the building."
"You got that?" Chen exhaled in relief.
"Got it. Thank you, Officer Daniels." "Don't thank me. Just nail those bastards." They left through the same door they'd entered, Henry the custodian giving them a subtle nod as they passed. Jake didn't breathe normally until they were back in Chen's car. "That was too close," Chen said, her hand shaking slightly as she started the engine. "But we got what we needed." "Yeah, we did. Now we just have to figure out how to use it without admitting we obtained it through questionable means." The next morning, Jake woke to his phone ringing. Marcus. "Judge Henderson issued her ruling." Jake's heart stopped. "And?" "She's dismissing the assault charges against you. She found that you acted in defense of yourself and Emma, using reasonable force given the circumstances." Dylan's medical records were inconclusive about the source of his shoulder injury, and she didn't find credible evidence that you used excessive force. Relief flooded through Jake so intensely he had to sit down. "We won?" "On the criminal charges, yes. But Jake, she's also ruling that there's sufficient evidence of mutual combat to justify charges against Dylan for assault. She's referring his case to juvenile court." "Mutual combat? Dylan assaulted Emma and then assaulted me. How is that mutual?" "Because his lawyers convinced her that Dylan genuinely believed he was helping Emma and that he pushed you out of fear, not aggression. It's garbage, but it gives the Sutherlands a narrative where their son isn't the villain." Jake felt his relief curdling into frustration. "So he faces juvenile charges that will probably get dismissed because he's a rich kid with connections?" "Probably. unless we can prove this is part of a larger pattern, which is where Detective Chen's information becomes critical.
Jake told Marcus about the school files, the social media evidence, the 17 other victims. Marcus listened in silence. When Jake finished, he said quietly, "That's game-changing. If we can get that evidence admitted, we can show this isn't one incident of mutual combat. It's one incident in a years-long campaign of targeted harassment. That changes everything." Chen got the evidence through questionable means.
Will it even be admissible? In criminal court? Maybe not. But in the civil suit the Sutherlands filed against you? Different rules. And in the court of public opinion? Absolutely. The court of public opinion was about to become very interested in this case. That afternoon, someone leaked the story to the press. Not the sanitized version the Sutherlands had been feeding local media. The real story. Emma's assault. The video evidence. Dylan's pattern of harassment. The school's cover-up. By evening, it was national news. Jake's phone started ringing with interview requests from reporters, producers, news networks. Marcus fielded most of them, but a few got through. "Chief Morrison, this is Andrea Wilson from CNN. We'd like to interview you about your experience defending Emma Collins and the subsequent legal battle. We believe your story represents a larger issue of—" Jake hung up, called Marcus. "The media circus is starting." "I know. I've gotten 47 requests in the past 2 hours, including 3 from major networks and 2 from documentary filmmakers. What do? We control the narrative. We give one interview on our terms, where we can tell the whole story. We make sure Emma and her mother are protected. And we use the publicity to pressure the Sutherlands into backing down." You think publicity will make them back down? I think Richard Sutherland has built his reputation on being a generous philanthropist and community leader. If the public finds out he's been protecting his son while his son tortures disabled kids for profit, that reputation crumbles. And men like Sutherland care more about their reputation than anything else. Marcus arranged an interview with a national news program known for investigative journalism. They agreed to interview Jake, Emma, and Sarah Collins together, with Marcus present to ensure no one was pressured or misrepresented. The interview was scheduled for 3 days later. In the meantime, the story continued to grow. Detective Chen leaked the information about Dylan's social media accounts, carefully, anonymously, through channels that couldn't be traced back to her. Within hours, internet sleuths had found archived versions of the deleted content. Screenshots spread across Twitter, Facebook, Reddit. The Freak Watch videos went viral, but not in the way Dylan had intended. Instead of people celebrating the harassment, they were horrified by it. Disability rights organizations condemned it. Veterans groups called for Dylan to face hate crime charges. Parents across the country shared the videos with comments like, "This could have been my child." The backlash was immediate and brutal. Dylan's college acceptance letters were rescinded. Brett lost his athletic scholarship. Marcus was expelled from the private school he attended. Their parents tried to control the damage, issuing statements about how their sons had made mistakes and were learning from them. But the internet doesn't forgive rich kids who torture disabled children for entertainment. 2 days before the scheduled interview, Jake got a call from an unknown number. "Chief Morrison, this is Gerald Preston. I represent the Sutherland family."
"I know who you are, Mr. Preston."
"I'm calling to discuss a settlement offer. My clients are willing to drop their civil suit against you in exchange for you declining to press charges against Dylan and agreeing not to speak publicly about this matter." "So you want me to shut up and go away?" "I want to offer you a way to end this without further damage to either party. Chief Morrison, you won the criminal case. Be satisfied with that. Continuing to pursue this matter will only cause more pain for everyone involved, including Emma Collins."
Don't you dare use Emma's name like you care about her.
"I care about resolving this matter in a way that allows everyone to move forward. My clients are prepared to offer a financial settlement to the Collins family as well. $200,000 in exchange for signing a non-disclosure agreement.
Jake felt sick. You're trying to buy their silence.
I'm trying to help a struggling family. Mrs. Collins works 2 jobs to pay for her daughter's medical care. $200,000 could change their lives. All they have to do is agree not to pursue further legal action or speak publicly about what happened.
You mean agree to let your client get away with assault?
I mean agree to accept compensation for their suffering and move on with their lives. I'll pass your offer along to Mrs. Collins, but I'm guessing she'll tell you the same thing I'm about to. We're not interested in blood money. We're interested in justice. Chief Morrison, be reasonable. My clients have resources you cannot match. They can tie you up in legal proceedings for years. They can make your life a living hell. Is that really worth it for one incident in a diner? It's not one incident. It's 17 victims. It's 2 years of documented harassment. It's a school system that protected bullies because their parents donated money. Yeah, Mr. Preston, that's worth fighting for. Then you're a fool, and you're going to lose everything. I've lost things before. I survived. Preston hung up without another word. Jake immediately called Sarah Collins and told her about the settlement offer. $200,000? Sarah said, her voice shaking. That's more money than I'll make in 5 years. That could pay for Emma's college, her medical care, everything. It could, but it comes with strings. You'd have to sign away your right to speak about what happened. Dylan would face no real consequences, and the next kid he targets would have no one to stand up for them. Sarah was quiet for a long time. What do you think I should do? I can't make that decision for you, Mrs. Collins. Only you and Emma can decide if justice is worth more than financial security.
Can I ask you something, Chief Morrison? When you were deployed, when you were fighting, were you ever offered a way out? A way to go home early, to avoid danger, to take the easy path? Jake thought about the mission where Rodriguez died, about the offer to extract early when intelligence suggested the risk level had increased. Yes, several times. Did you take it? No. Why not? Because leaving would have meant abandoning my team. It would have meant the mission failed. It would have meant everything we'd already sacrificed was for nothing. Then I think you understand why I can't take this money. Sarah's voice grew stronger. Emma has been fighting every day of her life just to exist in a world that wasn't built for her. She's fought through pain and surgery and therapy and people who treat her like she's less than human. And she's never quit. How can I tell her to quit now? How can I tell her that justice isn't worth fighting for? Jake felt emotion tighten his throat. You're a good mother, Mrs. Collins. I'm a scared mother. But I'm raising a brave daughter, and she deserves to see that bravery gets rewarded, not bought off. The interview aired on a Thursday night at prime time. 60 million people watched as Emma Collins, 16 years old and terrified, told the truth about what Dylan Sutherland and his friends had done to her. She talked about the months of harassment, the videos posted online, the comments from strangers calling her worthless, broken, a waste of space. The school administrators who told her to develop thicker skin. The moment in the diner when she thought no one would ever help her. And then she talked about Jake. He didn't know me, Emma said, her voice steady despite the cameras and lights and millions of people watching. He had no reason to help me, but he did. Because he saw someone who needed help, and he decided that was reason enough. And I think that's what heroes actually are. Not people who do amazing things, but people who do the right thing when everyone else is looking away. The interviewer turned to Jake. Chief Morrison, you faced significant legal and financial consequences for intervening that day. Do you regret your actions? Jake looked directly at the camera. No,
I don't regret protecting someone who needed protection. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that 43 adults watched a disabled teenager get assaulted and did nothing. I regret that our systems, our schools, our communities, our legal structures protect bullies when their parents have money. But I don't regret standing up for Emma Collins. I'd do it again tomorrow. You're currently facing a $2 million civil lawsuit from the Sutherland family. How do you plan to fight that? The same way I've fought everything else in my life. With truth, with honor, and with the support of people who believe that doing the right thing still matters. The interviewer paused. We reached out to the Sutherland family for comment.
They declined to appear on camera, but provided this statement. The statement appeared on screen, corporate and carefully worded. It expressed regret for the incident, claimed Dylan had been trying to help Emma, and suggested that the real victims were 3 teenage boys whose lives had been destroyed by a media witch hunt. Sarah Collins, watching from beside Emma, actually laughed. That's what they think this is? A witch hunt? My daughter was assaulted. There's video evidence. There are 17 other victims, and they think they're the ones being persecuted? The interviewer's next question was directed at all 3 of them. What do you want to see happen now? Emma answered first. I want Dylan and his friends to face real consequences, not just a slap on the wrist because their parents are rich. Real accountability for what they've done. Sarah added, I want the school system investigated. I want to know why administrators buried complaints about these boys for 2 years. I want to know how much money it takes to make a school ignore child abuse. Jake spoke last. I want people watching this to understand that what happened to Emma happens every day. Vulnerable people get targeted, get hurt, and everyone looks away because getting involved is hard. Because fighting back is expensive. Because systems protect power instead of victims. And I want that to change. Because if it doesn't, we're not really a civilized society. We're just bullies with better PR. The interview ended. Within an hour, it had been viewed 20 million times online. Social media exploded with support for Emma and condemnation of the Sutherlands. Hashtag Justice for Emma was trending worldwide. And then something unexpected happened. One by one, the other victims started coming forward. 17 students that Detective Chen had identified, but also others. Kids from different schools, different towns, different states. Kids had been targeted by Dylan and his friends at summer camps, sports tournaments, family vacations. Kids whose harassment had been documented and posted online for profit. Within 48 hours, the victim count reached 47. 47 children who'd been tortured for entertainment while their communities looked away. The Sutherland's legal team went into crisis mode. They issued new statements, threatened lawsuits against the media, claimed their clients were being cyberbullied. But you can't unring that bell. You can't make 47 victims disappear. The FBI announced they were opening an investigation into potential wire fraud and hate crime charges. The Department of Education launched an investigation into the school system. Multiple states announced they were reviewing whether similar harassment networks operated in their jurisdictions. And Richard Sutherland, the powerful businessman who owned half the town, watched his empire crumble in real time. His business partners distanced themselves. His charitable organizations asked him to step down from board positions. His country club membership was quietly revoked. Money couldn't fix this. Connections couldn't suppress this. Lawyers couldn't argue this away. For the first time in his life, Richard Sutherland faced consequences he couldn't escape. 3 days after the interview, Gerald Preston called Jake again. My clients are prepared to offer new terms. They'll drop their civil suit. They'll issue a public apology. They'll donate $1 million to disability advocacy organizations. In exchange, they ask only that you don't pursue criminal charges
beyond what the state has already filed. Jake let that sink in. They want me to accept their surrender. They want to end this before more damage is done to everyone involved.
What about Emma? What about the other 46 victims?
Individual settlements will be negotiated with each family. My clients are prepared to be generous. Your clients are prepared to pay for silence. My clients are prepared to take responsibility for their actions in a way that provides compensation to those who were harmed. Jake thought about that. Thought about Emma and her mother. Thought about the 17 other students Detective Chen had found. Thought about the 47 total victims who'd suffered in silence until someone finally fought back. I'll take your offer to Emma and her mother. But Preston, if this is another attempt to buy them off, if this is just a PR move to make the story go away, you tell your clients they can take their $1 million and choke on it. I'll relay your sentiment, though perhaps in more professional language. Jake hung up and called Sarah Collins, told her about the new offer.
What do you think? Sarah asked.
I think the Sutherlands are cornered, and they're trying to limit the damage. I think this offer is real because they have no other options. But I also think the question isn't whether to accept it. It's whether accepting it gives Emma and the other victims justice, or just gives the Sutherlands an easier way out. Sarah was quiet. Then, "Can I talk to Emma about this?" "Of course." 20 minutes later, Sarah called back.
Emma says yes, but only if the Sutherlands agree to 3 conditions.
First, Dylan has to personally apologize to every victim, on camera, with no script from his lawyers. Second, the family has to fund a permanent scholarship program for disabled students. And third, Richard Sutherland has to testify before Congress about how wealthy families use money to avoid accountability. Jake smiled. That 16-year-old is going to change the world someday. I know. She already changed mine.
Preston called back within an hour. The Sutherlands agreed to all 3 conditions. The surrender was complete. 2 weeks later, Jake stood in a packed congressional hearing room watching Richard Sutherland testify about systematic failures in how schools handle bullying when wealthy donors are involved. It was humiliating for Sutherland, powerful, historic, and absolutely necessary. Dylan read his apologies to 47 victims over the course of 3 days. Some of them accepted, some didn't. Emma listened to his apology and said, "I don't forgive you, but I accept that you're trying. That's enough for now." The scholarship fund was established with an initial donation of $5 million. It would provide full-ride college scholarships to 50 disabled students annually. And Jake went back to his life. Back to training canine units. Back to recs and morning runs, and the quiet satisfaction of serving without seeking recognition. But something had changed, something fundamental. Emma Collins had found her voice. 47 victims had found justice. And a community had learned that silence in the face of cruelty isn't neutrality. It's complicity. That was worth every moment of the fight. That was worth everything. But victory, Jake learned, didn't mean the war was over. 3 days after the congressional hearing, he got a call from Detective Chen that made his blood run cold. "Jake, we have a problem." One of the victims who came forward, a girl named Sophie Martinez from the next town over, she attempted suicide last night. Jake's hand tightened on the phone. "Is she alive?" "Yes, her mother found her in time. But Jake, she left a note. It said she couldn't handle the pressure, couldn't handle reliving the trauma, couldn't handle her story being public." The Sutherlands' legal team had been pushing her family to drop their settlement claim, threatening to expose private medical records if they didn't. They're still doing this? Even after everything? Gerald Preston claims he had no knowledge of it, that it was rogue associates acting without authorization. But the damage is done.
Sophie's in a psychiatric hospital, and her family is talking about withdrawing from the settlement entirely. Jake felt rage building in his chest.
Where are the Sutherlands now? Richard and his wife are at their estate. Dylan's at some therapeutic boarding school in Montana. Part of the settlement required him to complete treatment. Why? Because I'm going to pay them a visit. Jake, don't. You'll only make things worse. Let the legal process almost got a 15-year-old girl killed. I'm done waiting for systems to work. Marcus called 30 seconds after Jake hung up with Chen. I heard about Sophie Martinez. Jake, I know what you're thinking. Don't do it. I'm thinking someone needs to remind Richard Sutherland that settlements and apologies don't mean anything if he's still terrorizing victims behind the scenes. And you think confronting him at his house is the solution? You think that won't blow up in your face? I think I'm tired of watching vulnerable kids suffer while rich people play games with their lives. Jake, listen to me. You won a huge victory. You got justice for Emma and 46 other victims. You exposed a corrupt system and forced real change. Don't throw that away by doing something stupid now. Sophie Martinez tried to kill herself because the Sutherlands wouldn't stop threatening her. How is that justice? Marcus was quiet for a moment. It's not. But going to their house angry isn't going to help her. It's just going to give them ammunition to claim you're unstable and dangerous. Then what do I do? Nothing? No, you do what you've been doing. You fight smart. You document the threats. You get Sophie's family to file a formal complaint. You use the media attention you have to expose what's happening. You don't give the Sutherlands an excuse to paint you as the bad guy. Jake wanted to argue. Wanted to get in his truck with Rex and drive to the Sutherland estate and make Richard look him in the eye while explaining why he thought it was acceptable to push a suicidal teenager closer to the edge. But Marcus was right. Emotion without strategy was just chaos. Okay, Jake said finally. We do it your way. But if one more kid gets hurt because these people won't stop, then we'll deal with it, together, like we always do. Jake drove to the hospital where Sophie was being treated. Her mother, Maria Martinez, was sitting in the waiting room looking like she'd aged 10 years overnight. Mrs. Martinez, I'm Jake Morrison. I'm so sorry about Sophie. Maria looked up, her eyes red from crying. You're the Navy SEAL, the one who helped Emma Collins. Yes, ma'am. Sophie told me about you. She said you gave her hope that someone would finally hold those boys accountable. Maria's voice cracked. But then the lawyers started calling. They said if we didn't drop our claim, they'd release Sophie's therapy records. They'd tell everyone about her eating disorder, her self-harm history, her suicide attempt 2 years ago. They said they'd make her look crazy so no one would believe her about the bullying. Jake felt his jaw clench. They threatened to weaponize her mental health history? They said it wasn't a threat, just a warning about what the defense would bring up in court. They said it would be easier for everyone if we just took a small settlement and signed the NDA. Maria looked at Jake with desperate eyes. I wanted to fight. I wanted Sophie to have justice like Emma got, but I can't lose my daughter. I can't watch her suffer more just to prove a point. You're not proving a point. You're protecting her, and that's exactly what you should do. But doesn't that mean they win? Doesn't that mean they scared us into silence just like they scared everyone else? Jake sat down beside her. Mrs. Martinez, can I tell you about a mission I was on in Afghanistan? She nodded, confused by the change in subject. We were tasked with extracting a group of civilians from a village that was about to be overrun by Taliban forces. We had a narrow window to get them out safely. But one of the civilians, an elderly man, refused to leave. He said running would show weakness, that the Taliban would think they'd won if he abandoned his home. What happened? My team leader told him something I've never forgotten. He said, surviving
isn't surrendering. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is live to fight another day. Jake met Maria's eyes. Your daughter's surviving is what matters. Everything else is secondary. If that means taking a smaller settlement and protecting her privacy, that's not weakness. That's wisdom. Maria started crying again. I just want her to be okay. I just want her to have a life without this hanging over her. Then give her that. Take the settlement if that's what keeps her safe. Let other people carry the fight forward. Your job is to be her mother, not her warrior. Will there be other people? Will anyone else keep fighting if families like us drop out? Yes, Jake said with certainty. Because Emma Collins isn't dropping out. Because there are 46 other families who want justice. Because Detective Chen and lawyers like Marcus and advocates across the country are watching this case and won't let it disappear quietly. Maria wiped her eyes. Can I ask you something, Chief Morrison? Of course. Why do you care so much? These aren't your kids. This isn't your fight. You could have walked away from that diner, and none of this would have touched you. Jake thought about Rodriguez, about the 8-year-old girl with the club foot, about every moment in his life when he'd had the choice between intervention and apathy. Because someone I respected once told me that if we can't protect vulnerable people from those who want to hurt them, what are we even doing here? And I think he was right. I think that's the whole point of having strength, using it to protect people who don't have it. Maria reached out and squeezed his hand. Thank you for everything you've done, for caring when you didn't have to. How's Sophie doing? Can I see her? The doctors say she's stable, but she's not ready for visitors yet. Maybe in a few days. When she is ready, would it be okay if I brought someone to meet her? Who? Emma Collins. I think they might help each other. Maria's eyes widened. You think Emma would want to meet Sophie? I think Emma understands what Sophie's going through better than anyone else could. And I think sometimes the best medicine is knowing you're not alone. 2 days later, Jake arranged for Emma and Sophie to meet at a neutral location, a park that was accessible for Emma's wheelchair and quiet enough for a private conversation. Sophie was 16, small for her age, with dark circles under her eyes that spoke to weeks of sleepless nights. She sat on a bench next to her mother, her hands twisting in her lap, barely making eye contact when Emma wheeled up. Hi, Emma said simply. I'm Emma. I know. I saw your interview. You were really brave. So were you. Coming forward took courage. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. I wasn't brave. I tried to kill myself. That's not brave. That's weak. Emma moved her wheelchair closer. Can I tell you something? After the diner, after everything happened, I had nights where I thought about it too. About how much easier it would be if I just didn't exist anymore. If I didn't have to deal with cerebral palsy and bullies and people who treat me like I'm broken. Sophie looked up, surprised. Really? Really. Because being strong all the time is exhausting. Because sometimes the weight of everything feels impossible to carry. Because when you're vulnerable, people see that as permission to hurt you, and fighting back every single day gets so tiring. So what stopped you? My mom, Chief Morrison, Rex. Emma smiled slightly. And spite, honestly. I was so angry that Dylan and his friends thought they could destroy me. I wanted to prove them wrong more than I wanted to give up. Sophie wiped her eyes. The lawyers said they'd tell everyone about my eating disorder, about the time I cut myself, about all the worst moments of my life. They said no one would believe me because I'm mentally unstable. They said similar things about me, that I was looking for attention, that I was exaggerating because I wanted money, that my disability made me unreliable. Emma's voice hardened. They were wrong. And they're wrong about you, too. But you had Chief Morrison to protect you. You had lawyers and media attention.
I don't have any of that. Jake, who'd been standing back to let the girls talk, stepped forward. Sophie, you do have protection. You have advocates. You have people who believe you. And if you want to keep fighting, we'll make sure you have the resources to do it safely. But if you don't want to keep fighting, if you need to step back to protect your mental health, that's okay too. Your well-being matters more than winning. Sophie looked at her mother, then at Emma, then at Jake. I don't want to let them win. I don't want other kids to go through what I went through. Then don't let them win, Emma said firmly. But also don't sacrifice yourself to stop them. There's a middle ground. You can share your story without destroying yourself in the process. You can fight without being on the front lines every day. How? You let people like Chief Morrison and his lawyer handle the legal stuff. You let advocates speak on your behalf when it gets too hard. You take breaks when you need them. And you remember that healing isn't linear. Some days you'll feel strong enough to fight, and some days you'll need to rest. Both are okay. Sophie nodded slowly. My mom wants me to take the settlement and drop out. What do you want? I want justice, but I also want to not feel like dying every time I think about this. Emma reached out and took Sophie's hand. Then we'll figure out how to get you both. Justice doesn't have to mean suffering. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is ask for help. Over the next week, Jake worked with Marcus to restructure Sophie's involvement in the case. They brought in a therapist who specialized in trauma, arranged for Sophie to give her testimony via video deposition, so she wouldn't have to face the Sutherland's lawyers in person, and connected Maria with support groups for parents of bullying victims. Sophie didn't drop her claim, but she also didn't destroy herself pursuing it. Meanwhile, the FBI investigation into Dylan, Brett, and Marcus was intensifying. Federal agents had seized computers, phones, and financial records. What they found was worse than anyone had imagined. The harassment network wasn't just 3 boys in one town. It was a coordinated operation spanning 7 states, involving hundreds of participants who paid subscription fees to access exclusive content of vulnerable people being tormented. Dylan, Brett, and Marcus had been running a business, a profitable one. In the past 3 years, they'd made over $400,000 from their Freak Watch network. They'd recruited other teenagers to participate, offering a cut of the profits. They'd established tiers of membership. Basic subscribers got access to daily humiliation videos. Premium subscribers could request specific targets. Elite subscribers could participate in planning harassment campaigns. It was systematic, organized, deliberately cruel. And it had operated for 3 years, while schools, parents, and communities looked the other way. The FBI arrested 12 additional individuals, 9 teenagers and 3 adults who'd been hosting servers and processing payments. Charges included conspiracy to commit hate crimes, wire fraud, racketeering, and distribution of child exploitation material. Jake watched the news coverage with Rex at his feet, feeling both vindicated and sickened. This was bigger than one incident in a diner. This was evidence of a cultural rot that allowed cruelty to flourish as long as it was profitable. His phone rang. Commander Williams, his CO at the naval base. Morrison, I need you to come in. We need to talk. Jake's stomach dropped. Is there a problem, sir? Just come in. We'll discuss it here. An hour later, Jake sat in Williams's office, trying to read the commander's carefully neutral expression. Jake, the Navy's been getting pressure about your situation, specifically about your media presence and the ongoing legal battles. Sir, I've been on leave for all of my court appearances. I haven't used my position for... Williams held up a hand. I know. You've followed every regulation to the letter. But the problem isn't what you've done.
It's the optics of having an active-duty SEAL involved in a high-profile civilian legal case. You're ordering me to back down? I'm telling you what the brass is saying. They're concerned about the Navy being associated with controversy. They're worried about political fallout, about donors getting upset, about headlines that might affect recruitment. Jake felt anger building. So they want me to stop fighting for kids who were tortured by rich bullies because it might make some donors uncomfortable? They want you to consider whether continuing this fight is worth the impact on your career. Williams leaned forward. Jake, I'm on your side. You know that.
But I also have to tell you the truth. If you keep pushing this, if you keep doing interviews and appearing in court and making the Navy's legal office nervous, there will be consequences.
What kind of consequences? Transfer to a non-combat role? Forced early retirement? Maybe nothing official, just getting passed over for promotions and choice assignments, until you get the message and leave on your own. That's retaliation. That's politics. And it's not fair, and it's not right. But it's real. Williams sighed. I'm giving you a heads up so you can make an informed decision. If you want to protect your career, you need to step back from the spotlight. Let the lawyers handle it. Stop doing interviews. Focus on your duties here. And if I don't? Then you need to be prepared for your career to suffer. Maybe end. Is that worth it to you? Jake thought about Emma, about Sophie, about 47 victims who'd finally found someone willing to fight for them. Yes, sir, it's worth it. Williams nodded slowly, like he'd expected that answer. Then, off the record, as someone who respects the hell out of you, make sure you document everything. Every conversation, every order, every hint of retaliation. Because when they come after you, and they will, you're going to need evidence that you were targeted for doing the right thing. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me. I'm not in a position to protect you from this. I wish I was, but I'm not. Williams stood, extending his hand. For what it's worth, Rodriguez would be proud of you. And so am I. Jake left the office, knowing his Navy career was likely over. 20 years of service, 7 deployments, countless missions, all of it potentially ending because he'd stood up for a disabled teenager in a diner. But as he drove home with Rex beside him, he realized something important. He wasn't angry. He was at peace with the choice. Because some things mattered more than careers. Some things mattered more than avoiding controversy or protecting institutional comfort. Justice mattered more. Truth mattered more. Protecting vulnerable people from those who'd hurt them mattered more. And if his career was the price for those things, he'd pay it without regret. 2 weeks later, the federal trial began. Not Jake's trial. The trial of Dylan, Brett, Marcus, and 9 co-conspirators on racketeering and hate crime charges. Jake attended every day, sitting in the gallery with Rex, watching as prosecutors laid out the evidence of a years-long conspiracy to profit from cruelty. The testimony was brutal. Victim after victim took the stand, describing harassment that had driven them to depression, self-harm, attempted suicide. Parents described finding their children in crisis, trying to get help from schools that dismissed their concerns, watching their kids suffer while feeling powerless to stop it. The financial records were damning. $400,000 in documented payments, with evidence suggesting the actual amount was closer to $600,000 when you included cryptocurrency transactions and cash payments. The videos were worse. The jury watched hours of footage showing teenagers being tormented while subscribers posted comments encouraging escalation. Comments like, "Make the cripple cry," and "I'll pay extra if you knock the wheelchair kid down again," and "Find more retards, this is hilarious." Several jurors were crying by the third day of testimony. Dylan's defense attorney, not Preston, who'd withdrawn from the case citing ethical concerns, tried to argue that Dylan was just a kid who'd made mistakes, that he'd been influenced by older co-conspirators, that he deserved a second chance. The prosecution's response was simple. They played Dylan's interview from one of the premium videos, where he'd explained his business model. "People pay to see freaks get what they deserve," Dylan said on camera, smiling. "We're providing a service, entertainment. And if some genetic mistakes get their feelings hurt, well, maybe they should have thought about that before being born defective." The defense had no answer for that. On the 10th day of trial, the prosecution called an unexpected witness, Emma Collins. She wheeled to the stand, was sworn in, and faced the jury with the same determination she'd shown in her first testimony months ago.
"Emma," the prosecutor said gently, "can you tell the jury how Dylan Sutherland's harassment affected your life?"
Emma took a breath. "Before it started, I was just a regular kid, dealing with regular disability stuff. Physical therapy, doctor's appointments, school accommodations. It wasn't easy, but it was manageable. After Dylan and his friends started targeting me, everything changed." "How did it change?" "I stopped sleeping. I developed anxiety so bad I'd throw up before school.
"I stopped eating because they made fun of my weight. I started having panic attacks when I saw groups of teenagers because I never knew if they were going to hurt me." Emma's voice remained steady. "But the worst part wasn't the physical stuff, or even the anxiety. It was the feeling that I didn't matter, that no one cared enough to help me, that I could suffer in front of dozens of people and not one of them would think I was worth protecting."
"When did that change?" "When Chief Morrison helped me in the diner, when he saw me on the floor and decided that helping me was more important than avoiding conflict. That was the first time in months that I felt like a human being instead of a target." The prosecutor nodded. "Thank you, Emma. No further questions." Dylan's attorney stood for cross-examination.
He looked uncomfortable, like he knew there was no good way to question a 16-year-old disabled girl who'd been tortured by his client.
"Miss Collins, you've become quite famous from this case, haven't you?"
"I didn't want to be famous. I wanted to be left alone."
"But you've done interviews, appeared on national television, become a spokesperson for various advocacy groups. That's brought you opportunities you wouldn't have had otherwise, correct?" Emma's expression didn't change.
"If you're asking if I think being assaulted and humiliated was worth it because I got to be on TV, the answer is no. I'd give back every interview, every opportunity, every bit of attention, if it meant going back to before Dylan decided I was entertainment." "But you have profited from this situation."
"Objection," the prosecutor said. "Argumentative and offensive." "Sustained. Mr. Crawford, move on." The attorney tried a different approach.
"Miss Collins, isn't it true that you and your mother are receiving a substantial settlement from the Sutherland family?" "We were offered a settlement. We haven't accepted it yet."
"Why not?"
"Because money doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't undo months of trauma. It doesn't change the fact that Dylan and his friends thought torturing me was acceptable as long as they got paid for it."
"So you're holding out for more money?"
Emma leaned forward, her voice sharp. "I'm holding out for justice. I want Dylan to face real consequences. I want the system that protected him to be held accountable. I want other kids who are being bullied to know that their suffering matters, even if they're not rich or connected or perfect."
The attorney had no response to that. The trial lasted 3 more days. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Dylan, Brett, and Marcus were sentenced as juveniles, but would face additional federal charges as adults when they turned 18. The 9 adult co-conspirators received sentences ranging from 5 to 15 years. It wasn't enough to undo the damage, wasn't enough to heal the victims, but it was something. It was accountability that had seemed impossible 6 months ago.
Jake was leaving the courthouse when he felt a hand on his shoulder.
He turned to find Richard Sutherland standing there, looking like he'd aged 20 years since this began.
"Chief Morrison, can I speak with you for a moment?" Jake wanted to say no, wanted to walk away, but something in Sutherland's expression made him pause. "You have 2 minutes." Sutherland took a shaking breath. "I want to apologize. Not for Dylan. He needs to apologize for himself. But for my role in this. For protecting him when I should have been holding him accountable. For using my money and influence to shield him from consequences. For teaching him that power meant never having to face the results of your actions."
"Why are you telling me this?"
"Because my son is in prison. My reputation is destroyed. My marriage is ending. My business is failing. And none of that matters compared to what really haunts me. The 17-year-old girl who tried to kill herself because my lawyers wouldn't stop threatening her.
The 47 kids who suffered while I made excuses for my son. The realization that I created a monster and then protected that monster from the people trying to stop him."
Jake studied him, saw genuine remorse, genuine pain. It didn't change what Sutherland had done, but it was something.
"What do you want from me, Mr. Sutherland? Forgiveness?"
"No, I don't deserve forgiveness. I want—" He stopped, struggling with the words. "I want you to know that you were right. About everything."
And I was wrong. And if I could go back and make different choices, I would. But I can't. So all I can do is try to do better going forward.
"How?" "The scholarship fund is just the start. I'm liquidating assets to create a foundation focused on anti-bullying programs, mental health services for victims, and accountability programs for perpetrators. I'm funding research into how wealth enables abuse and how to prevent it.
I'm using what influence I have left to push for laws that protect vulnerable people from exactly the kind of predatory behavior my son engaged in."
Jake considered that. "That's good. It's not enough, but it's a start." "I know. Nothing will ever be enough. But I need to try." Sutherland met Jake's eyes. "Thank you for being the person who wouldn't look away. For being the person who stood up when everyone else, including me, failed. You saved my son from becoming an even worse human being.
And you saved those kids from suffering I enabled."
He turned and walked away before Jake could respond. Jake stood there for a long moment, processing. Then Rex nudged his hand, and they walked toward the parking lot where Emma and Sarah Collins were waiting.
"Was that Richard Sutherland?" Sarah asked.
"Yeah."
"What did he want?"
"To apologize, and to tell me he's trying to do better." Emma's expression was skeptical.
"Do you believe him?"
"I don't know, but I think he believes himself, and that's a start." Jake looked at both of them. "This is really over, isn't it? The trial, the fight, all of it?" Sarah smiled, tired but genuine. "This part is over, but the work continues. Emma's joining the foundation board to help direct the scholarship program. I'm connecting with other parents to advocate for better bullying prevention policies. Detective Chen is working on legislation to regulate online harassment."
"The fight continues. It just looks different now." "What about you, Chief Morrison?" Emma asked. "What's next for you?"
Jake thought about his conversation with Commander Williams, about the career that was probably ending, about the choice between protecting his future and protecting people who needed it. "I don't know yet, but whatever it is, it'll involve standing up for people who need it, because that's what matters. That's what Rodriguez taught me, and it's what you reminded me of."
Emma smiled. "Good, because the world needs more people who won't look away."
Jake realized she was right. This wasn't an ending. It was a transformation. From one form of service to another, from protecting people in combat zones to protecting them in communities, from fighting enemies overseas to fighting cruelty at home. Same mission, different battlefield. And he was ready for it. 6 months after the trial ended, Jake received orders he'd been expecting but dreading nonetheless.
Chief Petty Officer Morrison, you are hereby reassigned to Naval Station Norfolk, effective immediately. Administrative duties. No field operations. No training rotations. It was a demotion disguised as a lateral move. Everyone knew it. Commander Williams couldn't even look Jake in the eye when he handed over the paperwork. I'm sorry, Jake. I fought this as hard as I could. I know you did, sir. It's not your fault. It's not right. You did everything correctly. You followed regulations, took leave for court appearances, never used your position inappropriately. And they're punishing you anyway because you made some donors uncomfortable. Jake looked at the orders, then at Rex, who was lying at his feet as always. When do I report? 2 weeks. But Jake, Williams hesitated. You don't have to accept this. You could fight it. File a complaint for retaliation. Get the media involved again. And drag the Navy through another controversy? Make myself the story instead of letting the work speak for itself? Jake shook his head. No, I've had my fight. I won the parts that mattered. The rest is just politics. So you just going to accept this? Let them bury you in a desk job until you get frustrated enough to retire? Jake thought about that. About 20 years of service, ending not with honor, but with exile. About everything he'd worked for being reduced to filing reports and attending meetings. No, sir, I'm not going to accept it. I'm going to retire. Williams looked shocked. Jake, you're 3 years from full pension. If you retire now, I'll lose benefits, lose my retirement timeline, lose the career I've built. I know. Jake stood up. But I'll also be free to do the work that actually matters. And right now, that's worth more than staying in a system that punishes people for having integrity. You're really going to walk away? I'm really going to walk towards something better. The retirement paperwork took 4 weeks to process. In that time, Jake received offers he'd never expected. The first came from Marcus, his lawyer. I'm opening a nonprofit law practice focused on cases like yours and Emma's. Victims of bullying, harassment, civil rights violations. People who can't afford legal representation, but deserve justice anyway. I want you to be the operations director. I'm not a lawyer. You don't need to be. You need to be someone who understands what it's like to fight systems that protect powerful people at the expense of vulnerable ones. You need to be someone victims can trust. That's you, Jake. That's exactly you. The second offer came from Detective Sarah Chen. The department is creating a new unit focused on cyberbullying and online harassment. They want someone with investigative experience and a public profile that sends a message, we're serious about this. Your name came up, repeatedly. I'm not a cop, Chen. No, but you could be. The academy takes prior military experience. You'd finish training in 4 months instead of 6, and you'd be working cases that actually matter, protecting kids who need it. The third offer surprised him most. It came from Emma Collins. The foundation that Mr. Sutherland started? The one funding anti-bullying programs and scholarships? They want to expand it. Create a mentorship program where veterans work with disabled kids who've been bullied, teaching them self-defense, resilience, advocacy skills. They want you to run it. Emma, I appreciate that, but nothing. You're exactly what this program needs. Someone who understands both military service and what it's like to stand up for people when everyone else looks away. Someone who can teach these kids that being vulnerable doesn't mean being weak. Jake sat in his apartment that night, 3 job offers spread across his kitchen table, Rex's head in his lap. What do you think, boy? Which path? Rex, unhelpfully, just wagged his tail. Jake thought about Rodriguez, about the 8-year-old girl with the club foot, about Emma on that diner floor, about Sophie Martinez and 47 other victims who'd found their voices because someone finally listened. He thought about what Rodriguez had said. If we can't protect vulnerable people from those who want to hurt them, what are we even doing here? And he realized the answer wasn't choosing one path. It was creating a new one that incorporated all of them. 2 days later, Jake called a meeting with Marcus, Detective Chen, and Emma. I have an idea. It's ambitious and probably crazy, but I think it could work. He laid out his vision, an organization that combined legal advocacy, law enforcement cooperation, veteran mentorship, and victim support. A one-stop resource for families dealing with bullying and harassment. A place where victims could get legal help, police advocacy, emotional support, and practical skills training, all under one roof. We call it the Rodriguez Foundation, Jake said, named after the guy who taught me what service actually means. We fund it through grants, donations, and partnerships with existing organizations. We staff it with veterans who want to continue serving, lawyers who want to do pro bono work, and survivors who want to pay forward the help they received. Marcus leaned back in his chair, thinking. The legal structure would be complicated. Nonprofit status, liability issues, coordination with law enforcement. But it's doable. Chen nodded. And having a civilian organization that works with police could actually be more effective than either working alone. We face restrictions on what we can investigate without formal complaints. You wouldn't. Emma was smiling. When do we start? That's the thing, Jake said. I need to know if you're actually in. Not just supportive, but actively involved. Because this doesn't work without all of you. Marcus spoke first. I'm in. I was planning to start a nonprofit practice anyway.
This is better, more comprehensive, more impactful. Chen hesitated.
I'd have to be involved carefully. I can't officially work for you while I'm with the department. But I could consult, advise, facilitate connections, make introductions. That's enough, Jake said. Emma? I'm 17. I can't exactly run a foundation. No, but you can be the voice of it, the face that reminds people why this matters. And when you turn 18, when you graduate, you can decide how involved you want to be. Emma looked at her mother, who was sitting quietly in the corner. Sarah nodded. Okay, Emma said. I'm in, but on one condition. What's that? We make sure every single victim who comes through our doors knows they matter. Not because of how much media attention their case gets, or how sympathetic they are, or how good they are at telling their story, but because they're human beings who were hurt and deserve help. Everyone, no exceptions. Jake felt something tighten in his throat. Everyone, no exceptions. I promise. The Rodriguez Foundation opened its doors 4 months later in a small office space Marcus had secured through connections. They had 3 staff members, Jake, Marcus, and a social worker named Lisa Chen, who specialized in trauma counseling. They had a budget that made operating on a shoestring look luxurious, and they had more cases than they could possibly handle. The first client was a 12-year-old boy named David, who'd been bullied so severely he'd stopped speaking entirely. His parents had tried everything, changing schools, therapy, medication, homeschooling. Nothing worked. David had retreated into silence because words had been used to hurt him so many times, he couldn't trust them anymore. Jake met with David and his parents, Rex lying at the boy's feet throughout the meeting. David, I'm not going to make you talk if you don't want to, Jake said. But I am going to tell you a story. Is that okay? David nodded slightly. When I was deployed in Afghanistan, I worked with military dogs like Rex here. And one of those dogs, his name was Bruno, he got hurt really bad in an explosion. He survived,
But he was scared after that. Wouldn't let anyone touch him except his handler. Wouldn't work anymore. Just shut down completely. Jake paused, gauging David's reaction.
The boy was listening. Everyone said Bruno was done, that he'd never work again, never trust again, that the trauma had broken something in him that couldn't be fixed. But his handler, a guy named Rodriguez, he didn't give up. He spent months just sitting with Bruno, not forcing him to do anything, just being present, showing Bruno that not everyone was going to hurt him. What happened? The voice was barely a whisper, but it was there. David had spoken. Jake smiled. Bruno got better, slowly. It took almost a year, but he started trusting again, started working again. He ended up saving lives because Rodriguez refused to give up on him when everyone else had. I'm not a dog. No, you're not. You're a brave kid who's been hurt by people who should have protected you. And you shut down because that was the only way to stay safe. That makes sense. That's smart survival. But David, Jake leaned forward slightly. You don't have to survive alone anymore. We're here to make sure you're safe. To make sure the people who hurt you face consequences. To make sure you can find your voice again when you're ready. David's mother started crying quietly. His father put a hand on Jake's shoulder. Thank you, he said. Just thank you for seeing him, for treating him like he matters. He does matter, Jake said simply. Every kid who walks through our doors matters. Over the next 6 months, the Rodriguez Foundation handled 43 cases. Some were straightforward, clear evidence of bullying, willing school cooperation, families who just needed legal guidance. Others were complicated, schools that refused to acknowledge problems, police departments that didn't take cyberbullying seriously, families too scared to fight back. Jake learned that victory didn't always look like courtroom wins and criminal convictions. Sometimes it looked like a kid smiling for the first time in months. Sometimes it looked like a parent finally believing their child. Sometimes it looked like a school administrator actually implementing policy changes instead of covering up complaints. But the case that changed everything came on a Tuesday afternoon, when a woman named Patricia Warren walked into their office with her son Michael. Michael was 14, autistic, and had been systematically tortured by classmates for 2 years. The harassment was brutal. Physical assault, sexual comments, videos posted online showing him in vulnerable moments. He'd attempted suicide twice. The school says it's Michael's fault, Patricia explained, her voice shaking. They say he provokes the other students by being different. They say if he can't handle normal social interaction, maybe he should be in a different placement. Jake felt rage building in his chest. They're blaming your son for being bullied because he's autistic? They're saying he doesn't fit in the general education environment, that he's disruptive, that the other students have a right to learn without his behaviors interfering. What behaviors? Being autistic? Existing? Patricia started crying. I don't know what to do. I can't afford a private school. I can't homeschool because I work full-time. And Michael won't survive another year in that environment. He just won't. Marcus pulled the school's files and found something that made him swear creatively. Jake, look at this. The school has documented 47 incidents of Michael being assaulted or harassed. 47. And in every single report, they blame Michael for triggering the other students. They're covering their asses. If they admit the bullying is happening, they have to acknowledge they failed to stop it. It's worse than that, Marcus pointed to several documents. The kids harassing Michael? 3 of them are athletes, star players whose parents donate to the sports programs. The school is protecting the bullies because they generate revenue. Like Dylan Sutherland all over again. Exactly like Dylan Sutherland. Jake looked at Michael, who was sitting quietly in the corner, stimming with a fidget spinner. The boy looked exhausted, defeated. like he'd given up on anyone ever helping him. "Mrs. Warren, we're going to help you. We're going to file complaints with the Department of Education, the Department of Justice, and every advocacy organization we can find. We're going to make so much noise that the school can't ignore this anymore." But what if they retaliate? What if they expel Michael or make things worse? Then we sue them into oblivion. And we make sure every news outlet in the country knows that they're punishing a disabled child for being bullied. The case took 8 months to resolve. 8 months of fighting with school administrators who denied problems, attorneys who tried to intimidate, bureaucrats who claimed their hands were tied. But Jake had learned patience from Rodriguez, had learned persistence from Emma, had learned that sometimes justice requires outlasting your opponents rather than overpowering them. The breakthrough came when Detective Chen found evidence that the school's principal had been deleting harassment reports to improve the school's safety statistics. Federal investigators got involved. The Department of Education opened a civil rights investigation. Suddenly, the school was very interested in cooperation. They agreed to implement comprehensive anti-bullying policies. They agreed to provide training for staff on supporting neurodiverse students. They agreed to hold the students who'd harassed Michael accountable. Most importantly, they agreed to stop blaming victims for being vulnerable. Michael returned to school under a safety plan that actually protected him. Within 3 months, he was smiling again, participating in class, making friends with students who appreciated him instead of tormenting him. "He's talking about college," Patricia told Jake 6 months after the settlement. "Last year he was planning his suicide. This year, he's planning his future. That's because of you. That's because you didn't give up on him. I just helped clear the path. You did more than that. You showed Michael that being different doesn't mean being defective, that needing support doesn't mean being weak, that the world has people in it who will fight for you, even when you can't fight for yourself." The Rodriguez Foundation's success brought attention. National news covered their work. Advocacy organizations partnered with them. Donors started contributing funds that allowed them to expand. Within a year, they had offices in 3 cities. Within 2 years, they'd helped over 300 families. Within 3 years, they'd become the national model for comprehensive bullying intervention. Jake was offered speaking engagements, television appearances, book deals. He turned down most of them, preferring to focus on the actual work rather than the publicity. But he accepted one invitation that felt important: a congressional hearing on bullying prevention legislation. Jake testified alongside Emma, now 19 and a college student studying social work. They sat at the same table where Richard Sutherland had testified years earlier. But this time, the message was about solutions instead of failures. "The question isn't whether bullying exists," Jake told the committee. "We know it does. The question is whether we care enough to stop it. And right now, our systems suggest we don't. We have laws that protect property more vigorously than we protect children. We have schools that prioritize donor relationships over student safety. We have communities that look away from suffering because addressing it is uncomfortable." He paused, making eye contact with several committee members. "After I helped Emma Collins in that diner, I was sued for $2 million, threatened with criminal charges, and eventually pushed out of my military career. And I'd do it again tomorrow, without hesitation. But most people won't. Most people see someone being hurt, and they walk away because getting involved has consequences they can't afford." Emma leaned toward her microphone. "We need to make it easier to do the right thing, and harder to do the wrong thing. That means laws that protect people who intervene. That means holding schools accountable when they ignore bullying. That means creating resources so families don't have to choose between justice and financial survival." The committee asked questions for 2 hours. Some were supportive, some were skeptical. One congressman suggested that Jake and Emma were exaggerating the problem, that kids just needed to develop thicker skin. Jake's response was measured but firm. "Sir, with respect, I've seen combat in Afghanistan. I've watched friends die. I've faced actual terrorists who wanted to kill me. And I'm telling you that some of the cruelest behavior I've ever witnessed has been American teenagers tormenting vulnerable classmates while adults told victims to develop thicker skin. This isn't about being oversensitive. This is about systematic cruelty that we've normalized because addressing it requires effort we're not willing to invest." The congressman had no response. 3 months later, the legislation passed. It wasn't perfect. Compromises had been made. Loopholes existed. But it was progress. Real, measurable progress that would protect kids who needed it. Jake watched the signing ceremony on television from the Rodriguez Foundation's office, surrounded by staff who dedicated themselves to this work. "We did this," Marcus said quietly. "All of us. We actually changed the law." "No," Jake corrected. "Emma did this. Sophie did this. Michael and David and 300 other kids who were brave enough to share their stories. We just gave them a platform." Emma, who'd come to the office to watch with them, smiled. "Stop being humble. You started this. You decided that protecting one disabled girl in a diner was worth risking everything. That decision created ripples that became waves, that became this. Rodriguez started it. I just followed his example."
Then Rodriguez would be proud of what you've built. Jake thought about his dead teammate, about the 8-year-old girl with the club foot, about every choice he'd made since that day in the diner. "I hope so. I really do." 5 years after the incident in the diner, Jake stood in that same restaurant with Emma, Sarah, Marcus, Detective Chen, and Rex. The diner had changed. New ownership, fresh paint, updated menu. But it was still fundamentally the same place where everything had started. They sat in the booth where James's unit used to gather, where Emma had been doing homework when Dylan pushed her wheelchair, where Jake had made the decision that would alter the course of his life. Katie, the waitress who'd frozen that day, had quit not long after the trial. But the new server, a college student named Jennifer, knew the story. Everyone in town knew the story. "This is weird," Emma said, looking around. "Being back here, remembering what happened." "Good weird or bad weird?" Sarah asked. "Both. It's where the worst thing happened to me. But it's also where everything changed. Where I learned that someone would stand up for me. Where I found my voice."
Jake looked at each of them. The people who'd become family through fighting for something that mattered. Marcus, who'd given up a lucrative corporate law career to help people who couldn't pay. Detective Chen, who'd risked her career to investigate corruption when it would have been easier to look away. Sarah, who'd found strength she didn't know she had when her daughter needed protection. And Emma, who'd taken the worst experience of her life and transformed it into a mission to help others. "You know what I think about sometimes?" Emma said. "What would have happened if Chief Morrison hadn't walked into this diner that day? If he'd been 5 minutes later or had stopped somewhere else for lunch? If he'd seen what was happening and decided it wasn't his problem?" "Don't," Jake said quietly. "Don't think about that." "Why not? It's true. My entire life could have been completely different if you'd made a different choice. If you'd been the 44th person who looked away instead of the one person who didn't. But I didn't look away, and neither did any of you when it mattered." Marcus raised his coffee cup. "To not looking away." "To not looking away," they echoed, clinking cups. Jake's phone rang. He almost didn't answer, but the caller ID showed it was the Foundation's crisis line. "Morrison?" "Mr. Morrison, this is Angela Torres. I'm calling from California. My daughter was assaulted at school by a group of boys who've been harassing her for months. The school is saying it's her fault,
that she provoked them. I don't know what to do. I don't have money for lawyers.
I found your foundation online and I need help. Please.
Jake listened to the familiar story. Bullying, institutional failure, a mother desperate to protect her child. Miss Torres, where are you located exactly? San Diego. We don't have an office in San Diego yet, but I'm going to connect you with our California coordinator. She's going to help you file complaints, document everything, and make sure your daughter is protected. Can you hold for a moment? Yes, thank you.
God, thank you so much. Jake put her on hold and looked at his team.
Another case. School refusing to act. Family needs help. California? Marcus asked. San Diego. I know a lawyer there. Good guy, does pro bono work. I'll make a call. Detective Chen pulled out her phone. I'll reach out to their police department. See who handles these cases. Make an introduction. Emma was already typing on her laptop. There's a disability advocacy organization in San Diego.
I met their director at a conference. I'll send an email. Sarah squeezed Jake's hand. Help her, like you helped us. Jake took Angela Torres off hold and spent the next 20 minutes walking her through exactly what would happen next. Who would contact her? How the process worked. When he hung up, Emma was smiling. What? This is what it looks like when people refuse to look away. When they decide that protecting vulnerable people isn't optional, it's essential. Jake thought about Rodriguez, about every choice that had led him to this moment, about the career he'd lost and the purpose he'd found. You know what Rodriguez used to say? He said that service isn't about the uniform you wear or the rank you hold. It's about the choice you make when someone needs help and everyone else is looking away. It's standing in the gap between cruelty and dignity. It's deciding that protecting others matters more than protecting yourself. Is that what you think you're doing? Sarah asked. Standing in the gap? I think we all are. Every time we take a case, every time we fight for a kid who can't fight for themselves, every time we choose involvement over apathy. Jake looked at each of them. That's the whole point, isn't it? That's what makes us human instead of just creatures surviving. We have the capacity to care about suffering that doesn't directly affect us, to fight for people we don't know, to sacrifice comfort for justice. Rex, who'd been lying quietly under the table, lifted his head and rested it on Jake's knee. Even Rex understands, Jake said, scratching the dog's ears. He spent his career detecting explosives that could kill his team. He could have stayed safe, but he chose danger because that's what protecting others requires sometimes. Emma leaned back in the booth, her expression thoughtful. I wonder how many people we've helped without knowing it. Like, we helped Michael, and maybe Michael grows up to help someone else. And that person helps another person, and the ripples just keep spreading. That's the hope, Marcus said. That's why we do this work. Not just for the individual victories, but for the cultural change those victories create. Detective Chen nodded. I've seen it happening. Other police departments are creating specialized units for bullying cases. Schools are implementing better policies. Communities are taking this stuff seriously in ways they didn't 5 years ago. Because of Emma, Sarah said proudly. Because my brave daughter refused to stay silent. Because of all of us, Emma corrected. Because Chief Morrison decided protecting one disabled girl was worth his entire career. Because Detective Chen risked her job to investigate corruption. Because Marcus gave up money to do work that mattered. Because Mom found strength she didn't know she had. We all stood in the gap. That's what made the difference. Jake's phone rang again. Another parent, another crisis, another chance to help someone who needed it. He answered it because that's what he did now. That's who he'd become. Not Chief Petty Officer Morrison, Navy SEAL. Just Jake. Someone who refused to look away when people suffered. Someone who'd learned that real heroism wasn't about combat deployments or decorations or dramatic rescues.
It was about showing up, day after day,
Case after case, child after child,
making the choice to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. It was about standing in the gap between what is and what should be, and refusing to move until the gap closed. Rodriguez had taught him that. Emma had reminded him. And 300 families had proven it was worth the cost. As Jake talked to another desperate parent, Rex at his feet and his team ready to mobilize, he realized something important. He'd lost his military career,
lost his rank, his pension timeline, his sense of identity that had defined him for 20 years. But he'd found something better, something that mattered more. He'd found his purpose, and that purpose was simple. Protect those who need protection. Fight for those who can't fight for themselves. And never, not ever, not once, look away when someone needs help. Because if we can't protect vulnerable people from those who want to hurt them, what are we even doing here? Rodriguez had asked that question in a desert halfway around the world. Jake was answering it every single day in offices and courtrooms and schools across America. The answer was always the same. We stand in the gap. We protect those who need protecting. We refuse to let cruelty win. That's what service means. That's what honor requires. That's what makes us human, instead of just creatures surviving in a world that's often cruel and frequently unjust. And as long as there were people who needed help, Jake Morrison would be there to provide it. That was his promise to Rodriguez, to Emma, to every vulnerable person who'd ever suffered while the world looked away. That was who he was now. Not a Navy SEAL. Something better. Someone who refused to let anyone stand alone in their suffering ever again. And that was worth everything he'd sacrificed to get here.